usual channels. And to remind members of council that disclosure of pecuniary interest can be made now or at any time throughout the meeting. If required, we'll take a break at 8:30 p.m. So at this time, we have the adoption of the agenda that has been circulated. So the motion reads that council approves the agenda of session 3-2020 as circulated. Could I have a mover? Moved by Creelman and seconded by Martin. Any discussion, deletions? Seeing none, all in favor? That carries. And approval of the previous minutes, that council approves the minutes of session 2-2020 as circulated. Moved by Magtalo and seconded by Nix. Any discussion? All in favor? That carries. And now we're on to public question period. So if anyone in the gallery wants to come forward and pose a question to council, please come forward and use the mic, state your name and address. You have to push the button. There.
Good evening. How are you? Paul Seymour, First Line Mono. I think you guys all know who I am. I'm here. I have a couple short questions. It's pretty hard to pare this down to one. I've had a chance to look at your revisions and understand some of the challenges you're faced with. And I guess I would start by saying we're a little far afield from where we were. Understand why. We may have jumped the shark a little bit. We held town hall meetings. We all voted on things. And now everything seems to be almost tennis-centric. We are moving the picnic area because of the tennis. We're potentially adding lights because of the tennis. We're making a lot of alterations. It's a park. It's not a tennis. It's tennis courts within inside the park. My concerns are around, first of all, I'd like to talk about the parking. We all agreed 12 spots seemed to be appropriate. You need 9 times 12, 108 feet, some setbacks. I'm concerned we're coming a little far down my property line, frankly. I know that's self-serving, but there's quite a gap before the parking stops or starts. I would ask that you just rejig that. If it is to scale, it'll actually end in my backyard. So I'd ask that you look at that from a personal standpoint. As far as the lighted pathways are concerned, I sat here and that was voted down. I just want to confirm it's still no lighted pathway. I know you want to run conduit. I get that. It's future planning. But can you confirm tonight that there is no lighted pathway?
At the last meeting, we had said that we had decided on no lighting in the pathway.
Just want to make sure that hasn't changed. I understand the need for lights to play tennis. You want to extend the time of play, and I agree. I get that. What I would ask is that we consider that the hours of the park follow the CVC hours. To me, that makes sense. Why would you encourage people to be back there and to go into the CVC after hours? If you can't be in there at 9 o'clock, then why should you be in the park at 9 o'clock? I think they get a 30-minute grace to exit, 9:30 it might be. I don't really see any reason to be playing tennis at 11 o'clock at night. I think that's something that should be considered. And I guess the final comment is around the washrooms. They're right in the middle of the field. I know you can't put them by the trail. It was pitched as an accommodation to the CVC for the trail. It's a $75,000 spend. Only 3 people on the survey asked for it. Why is the washroom so critical? Isn't it something that you can put $75,000 in your pocket to maybe help with the retaining wall or some of the other issues that you're faced with?
Okay. So I don't know if anybody else wants to jump in about questions, but those issues have been discussed at great length. One of the concerns is that because of the length of time that some young and some old spend in the park or will have the potential of spending in the park, it's nice to have a facility. Now, this is a waterless washroom. It's not.
It's a fancy outhouse. I know. I've been. Right. I walked the trail. Yeah.
And it's
an eyesore, and you saw the one in the CBC took a big beating with spray paint. So it's not. It doesn't attract the right element. We've gone 10 years without one. People walk through there all the time. I understood when it was to be near the trail. I get that. CVC doesn't want one, so we don't need one either. Is my point. It seems like a very large spend when you've got some other challenges with lighting or grading, what have you. It's a big ticket item and only 3 people in the entire survey actually responded saying we need one. So the survey should have some value here.
Okay. And no other comments on, so we will be going through this item as the third item on unfinished business.
And park hours, can we address that at that time as well?
Yep.
Okay, perfect, thank you.
Any other questions from the gallery? Okay, seeing none then, we'll move on. There are no delegations this evening. And so our first item is on unfinished business is the draft plastic bag bylaw, and it's being given third reading this evening. So the revisions, I know Mr. Simpson has provided us with a certain amount of background information. Were there any comments from councillors on any adjustments that you are looking for in terms of wording or concerns? Yes?
Question, Your Honor, about the offense. Maybe I'm a little slow tonight, but it says the fine for offense is $500, and then when you get down to the bottom of it, of the document, it says that the set fine is $150.
Okay. Mr. Simpson?
So a single offense, which can be laid under Part 1 of the Provincial Offences Act as a set fine, would be as indicated on Schedule A, the $150. To accommodate multiple offenses or repeat offenses, we've gone with laying a Part 3 under the POA, which cannot be a set fine. That has to be a summons. And would be, in that case, $500 per offense in the event of laying a Part 3 summons for repeat or multiple offenses. So that takes it out of the hands of issuing a ticket. So the Part 1, $150, allows bylaw enforcement or any other peace officer to issue a ticket. But in the event of a repeat or multiple offenses by a business owner, this gives the municipality the option to go with a more substantial fine, recognizing it's more involved to go to a Part 3.
Thank you.
Fred?
I was talking to Fred about this before the meeting started. I'm curious about this bag that was sent to us. And Ralph and I were talking. I wasn't clear whether this would be exempted. It's banning plastic bags, and then it defines plastic bags. And just the fact that they're recyclable or compostable doesn't exempt them. But if they're reusable, it does exempt them. So the key then, as I understand it, is the definition of reusable. And my understanding is for this bag to be exempted, it's got handles. It would have to be capable of being used 100 times, or more, I guess. Which I wouldn't know from just looking at this bag. But also, I mean, would that mean we'd have to label these bags being capable? I mean, how would we ever test that they could be reused 100 times? Presumably, it has something with the innate strength of the bag. Maybe the gentleman in the audience can address this. I couldn't tell from the notification you put on this bag whether this would actually qualify as a reusable bag under our bylaw.
Okay, so that, I was just asking for questions from
Oh, okay,
councillors, so
okay.
if we're at that point, then, Mr. Ruska?
So my name's Joe Hariska, Vice President of Sustainability for the Canadian Plastic Industry Association, and those are very good questions. And in fact, I've got label bags that just came in from the manufacturer. It's 100% recyclable, as I've mentioned, polyethylene, 40% recycled content for circular economy, and reusable actually 125 times. This is made to the California standard, and if you don't know about California, they eliminated the thin plastic bag you're talking about banning. They said all plastic bags in California must be reusable, like these ones you've probably seen, or if it's a plastic bag, must be reusable 125 times, be capable of carrying so many pounds.
And washable.
Yes, and so These are washable. They can be used 125 times. They actually have a certification standard down there. So this is made to the California standard at this point, and it can carry, I believe it's 25 pounds. I'll tell you, I've put my barbells in here. It'll carry 40 pounds, so very durable. But the benefit, these are all going to end up in your landfill, and they are ending up in landfills. They're not recyclable. This one can be recycled, multi-purpose, multi-use.
And how did, because at some point, I mean, if we are to pass this bylaw in other municipalities, and if Justin Trudeau is going to live up to his promises, our bylaw becomes a bit redundant at that point. But how would the cost, the retail industry is going to have to abide by these rules. Is that, what's the cost of that bag compared to the 17?
Well, the thin bag is less than one. This is a 2 mil bag or 2.25 mils. It's jargon. You can Google it. The thin bag is probably around 0.7 mil, 17 microns versus 52 microns.
So how does the cost compare?
So, it's a hard one to answer. I know retailers are charging 5 cents for that thin bag. So the cost is less than 5 cents. This one, probably about 3 times more material. It's going to cost probably a little more than 5. I am not sure. Okay, and the retailer who buys it obviously negotiates those prices. So it's something my association does not get into.
Can I just pursue that? You've read our draft bylaw that we're giving third reading to. In your view, then, this bag that you sent us would qualify, would be exempt?
Well, and I came to talk about that. It talks about, it has to be of a durable material, or, these unrecyclable ones here. I would suggest putting into the bylaw, if it's a plastic bag, must be recyclable and can go through 100 uses. Be specific. That's what I would recommend.
California.
Yeah. And I can tell you, we're talking to the retailers about this right now. And they've been talking about 100 uses. So I would just be more specific that the plastic bag has to be 100 uses and recyclable. I'm not going to comment on these, but I can tell you, unprovoked at landfill operators are asking me why all these are ending up in the landfill. It doesn't help the environment in any way. But I'm here to speak to these. And I think if you do that in the bylaw, people will have choices. And choices are key to good environmental economic performance.
Back to my question to you. I mean, in a sense, sorry, I'm not speaking close enough to the mic, am I, Fred? Sorry. We almost have got that in our bylaw. I mean, I admit maybe a slight bit of clarification. You say it's usable 100 times. It doesn't, we don't say and recyclable, okay? In fact, in the definition of plastic bag, we exclude recyclable. It doesn't seem to be important in our bylaw.
Yeah.
But I guess maybe with just a tiny bit of tweaking, we would be in sync with what you'd like to see in terms of that bag being allowed. Yeah.
When I read your bylaw and I talked to our members about it, I said, it may or may not be there. It just says of a durable material. And I believe that's what it says in that section on reusable.
Primarily made of cloth or other durable materials, which I guess the point is it's what qualifies as durable.
Yeah. So durable would be the bag this thickness that can be used 100 when it comes to a plastic bag.
And you say that bag meets the California standard. Would it be as simple, Fred, I'm not a lawyer and I don't know how to word these things, is just putting in that clause about what a reusable bag is, a bag that meets the California standard?
Yeah, I'd have to check on that, whether we could refer in our bylaw to a standard created by, another jurisdiction or not. I can't answer that off the top of my head, Fred. But of course, we could put specific standards similar to those that California is using in our bylaw. That would avoid any reference to a document we don't have control over.
So I'm sorry. So the standard we're recommending is 100 reuses, okay? And the benefit here, and you got the bag, and too bad you get the labeled ones, they just came. But the benefit we're saying is it's not going to end up in landfill. Residents can recycle it, reuse it, use it for many things. And it has the lowest carbon footprint, because we're all battling carbon loading of any bag out there. And like I said, it's spreading across North America, and we're actually sending this to every province across Canada.
I don't dispute that it's got a low carbon footprint, but I asked my wife before I came, because I know what you're going to say about this, and I read the studies you referred us to. And I think one of the studies said 131 uses it would have to meet. My wife has had both of these bags for over 10 years, and she shops once a week. So that's 50 times 10, that's over, these bags, and well over 10 years. So these ones are up to well over 500 uses. I'm not putting down your bag, I'm just saying there are even better alternatives in terms of environmental impact.
I'm not here to turn down these bags. I mean, this cotton bag, you've seen the studies 1,000 to 2,000 times to equal the one bag. But I think we cannot be banning recyclable bags and putting in unrecyclable. I mean, it's a principle if we want to have circular economy. So and you're absolutely correct. Most of the reusable bags are made of plastic these days, as you know, polypropylene, non-woven, etc. The cotton, less common. So, but they are ending up in landfill, and it's a new problem on the market.
Joe, thanks for coming and speaking to us. I recognize that you represent the Association of Canadian Plastic Industry Association and have an interest in this. Yeah. We really can't include recyclable because it's a moving target. At the moment, you can't recycle plastic bags in Dufferin. They just don't accept them, and you probably know that. You can if you go down to Caledon.
Yeah.
And the bag you point out there, which is a polypropylene bag, at the moment can't be recycled, but you know eventually it will be. So I think we got to just leave the recycled part out of it and just deal with it as a reusable bag that has to be 100 times is fine. And I agree with Fred. I brought a bag in here that I bought in 2016. We can all show our bags. Have you got a bag? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
But anyway, these other bags are very durable and last a long time, probably longer, more uses than the shirt I'm wearing here.
Yep.
And it's not recyclable. So I'd be loath to include recyclable as a part of our bylaw.
If I could comment, and I think everybody should use all these bags as much as possible. Our industry promotes that. And I see what you're saying. If you include recyclable, I mean, just here in Mono, it's not. I can tell you more communities do recycle these things either at the stores, et cetera. But if you put recyclable in, yeah, you start to cut out other bags that people have, including the ones you have. So I think the 100 reuses is the key, I'll call it descriptor, that you'd want to put in your bylaw for polyethylene bags, because they would refer directly to this.
Just one question. I believe the polypropylene bags there mostly come from offshore, from Asia.
A lot of the bags, the majority are from China.
What about your bags?
They're all Canadian made.
Okay.
And most of the bags in North America are North American or Canadian made. So we don't want to ship jobs over to China. And in fact, just shipping these from China increases their carbon footprint. So anyways, that's another benefit. We keep Canadian jobs here.
John?
I'm just wondering whether your association or its members have considered approaching the Canadian Standards Association to develop a standard for that bag so that people can have the assurance of knowing that it has been tested and that it can be used as often as claimed. It's fairly well known, CSA has standards for absolutely everything, unbelievable range, not simply electrical appliances and so forth. So I just leave that suggestion with you that that might be more compelling for the public to know that they're buying something that has a standard and is manufactured to that standard.
Yeah, and we haven't approached them, and obviously there's a huge cost to doing that. And with our members dealing with California and other states, actually, We're just building on those certifications, just to keep the costs down.
Well, my experience with them is many, many years ago, and you're correct, it is expensive to get the standard written and to take a product and test it to that standard, but once that's done, I think it's well worth it as a marketing tool.
Yes, Sharon? Did you have anything? No. Okay.
Just to pursue it, then, my understanding, and I'm not the expert on this, is that we have one province that has a ban in now, and two more that I think the ban is coming in this year, Newfoundland and Nova Scotia. I think I'm correct.
Nova Scotia has already passed it.
Okay, is it in effect?
Yeah, it's passed.
Here's my curiosity. Have they, I haven't read the details of their bans. Would those bags be acceptable in Prince Edward Island, Newfoundland, and Nova Scotia?
Good question. I'm not sure. I can't answer it definitively. I could get back to you. They do endorse reusable bags, and I can tell you they're going to be getting these bags the same way as the other premiers and ministers are going to be getting them. I suspect the way they've written things, they did, from what I can tell from the legislation, they did not exclude plastic because, like I said, these are plastic. So I have to find out more. No one contemplated this here in Canada. We've been actually promoting it, but now it's coming to the fore because policymakers are now saying, can we recycle these?
And then just to follow up, if the mayor will allow me, so that bag is allowed in California, it's built to the California standard, and my understanding is New York, as of fairly shortly, are they following the California lead? But they're going to have a ban too, but so again, I'm curious, that bag would be allowed in New York under their ban, right?
Yeah, and again, I'm not totally familiar with the detail on the New York ban. They're banning, we believe, the thin bags. So this may qualify. I'd have to talk with the Plastic Bag Alliance down in the States, who in fact are actually promoting this across North America at the same time. Just as California's been the leader in it. So, you know, jurisdictions are noticing what California did, and we're actually promoting this out in BC, Victoria.
As a procedural question, then, because we have a draft bylaw, and this is its third reading, so it would be awkward to change any wording in what's before us tonight, but possibly, if we get this sorted out, it's fairly easy to introduce an amendment to an existing bylaw if the amendment was to specifically include these as reusables.
That's possible, but I don't see why you couldn't just give direction to take this bylaw back to make amendments and then bring it back as is, as opposed to pass it and then amend it.
I just wasn't
Yeah.
clear procedurally, since we're up to the third reading, whether we can do that.
Yeah. Go ahead.
I actually had a question for Mr. Lewis, so.
Right.
I agree with Fred. I think either way. We've amended bylaws. The reason of giving the bylaws first and second, third readings is you can make changes as you go. On a minor amendment like that, if you wanted to approve the bylaw as amended and give us the amendment, we can certainly work with that and have it all signed once we've made the amendment to it.
Yeah, and the amendment would be under that.
Or we can bring it back.
Well, I think in the interest of-
Yeah,
in
I
the
think
interest of time,
Well, yeah, because it will be another month before we can bring it back, because we're not meeting again until the 10th of March. So maybe what we could do at this point, if you're in agreement, is that we ask staff to pen something in terms of a proposal. We could deal with it later on in the agenda.
and I would suggest it's section 2.2.6A of the draft bylaw, that wording there just be expanded to include whatever number of specifications we need to put in the bylaw that then would basically define a California bag. Is that okay, Fred?
Yeah.
Yeah, we can absolutely do that.
Okay, then I'm happy.
Fred, I'm not sure that it's necessary.
Well,
I mean, let me read it to you. It says, it's a bag, a reusable bag is one that's primarily made of cloth or other durable material suitable for reuse. That qualifies.
Capable of 100 uses, so that's why.
It qualifies.
My very first question was, is that one exempt? And okay, maybe it is already exempt.
Well, we don't need to specify somebody's particular bag.
Okay.
I just leave it, I think it covers things well.
And if it does, it does.
Are we? So, Mr. Early, do you feel that it is covered, or should we be more specific?
With just discussing with Fred, there is a different definition in the California provisions for the poly bags. We can provide that to you in the form of an amendment for that section if you want. But as Mr. Haruska said, these bags apparently meet the 100 test, and that's already defined in our bylaw.
Okay. So how do we want to proceed? Do we want to wait for staff to do amendment to add clarity to this motion, or we want to go ahead and pass the motion and let that amendment come afterwards?
Well, as Ralph says, yeah, I guess it's covered by the durability and the 100 uses, so.
Do you want me to quickly review how California's legislation addresses that? So they define, like we have, a reusable bag. Then they say, in the event that it's a poly bag, here are the standards over and above the standard reusable. And then it lists half a dozen specifics. The risk being those specifics might evolve over time. Right? What's listed as a 2.25 millimeter bag may not be the industry standard in 2 years, or any of the other specifics. Though most of them are defining the character of the bag as opposed to the construction of the bag. So saying things like, it must be 15 liters, capable of carrying 22 pounds over a distance of 175 feet, a minimum of 125 times. I don't know who's doing that testing, but they have a standard in California and a process where a bag must be certified to be eligible, and then be marked such that it's met that certification. You know.
Okay, well, in the interest of getting this issue, which is what we were concerned about on the books, since we can always make further adjustments to the bylaw once passed, I think it would be prudent for us to continue on with the passing of the bylaw, and then we can do everything, okay? So with that in mind, the motion that the council gives third and final reading to a bylaw to regulate retail checkout bags, and that staff is directed to undertake an education program to inform residents and business owners of the bylaw. Could I have a mover? Moved by Nix and seconded by Mankdalo.
Just
Yeah?
just a question. When is it contemplated to come into effect? Did we not have a timeline between the passage of the bylaw and implementation?
Yeah, we're looking at January 1 of next year.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so if there's no further questions, all in favor? That carries. Thank you very much, Joe, for your time, and we look forward to any news.
Very much. You'll see it on the market.
Okay. Okay, the second item, OPP Regional Roundtable Sessions, Detachment-wide Police Service Boards. So, that's John's bailiwick. I know that was, who said that there was, Ralph was going to go to one of them? No.
No, Ralph's going to the conservation.
Conservation one, okay.
Yeah, I'm scheduled to go to the one on February 28th in Aurelia, and I just need to confirm with council that the position that we will take, and we will talk about this tomorrow at the Police Service Board, is that it would be unfortunate, and I choose my words carefully, to have a county-wide police service board, given the fact that Mono approaches its policing quite differently than some of the other municipalities. We have enhanced police services, and we're about to enhance further. As well, any Dufferin Police Service Board I think would be completely subsumed by Orangeville transition issues in the near and maybe even long term. So we would be at best getting short shrifts. So I think an argument can be made that a three-member police service board, only two of the members are actually paid an honorarium, is hardly a gigantic bureaucracy that needs to be tamed. And it may be a little bit more onerous for the detachment commander to go around to each of these police service boards, but I think at the end of the day it's worth it. We have a good relationship with the OPP, and I'd like to maintain that.
Okay. So council are in favor of that direction to Deputy Mayor? Okay, thank you for bringing this forward. Okay, item 3, the Island Lake Family Park and Fieldstone Parkette revised draft site plans. So we did get follow-up information from the technician at CVC regarding the requirements for approvals. And how did we want to proceed with this? I know Mr. Early had talked about placement in terms of being close to the lot line for the tennis courts, so, Ralph, did you?
I didn't quite catch what you said about, we've got some recent information. Is that more than the email?
This one that's on desk from,
Okay.
it came in today from CVC.
Thank you. That's the same one we got by email.
That's right.
So that's a little concerning to get this report at this time. So we really don't know whether we could do this or not as far as CVC is concerned yet.
Staff has come up with a suggestion, so Mr. Early, if you wanted to.
Yeah, sorry, just for clarification, regulations do not mean prohibition. Regulations just mean you need a permit for the use. Many of the homes that are located in proximity to the drainage feature that's coming through, that's all regulated and they come in. So they've all received their approvals through the subdivision approval process, as have all the homes that are down in the area by the beach volleyball court. So, so it's not a prohibition, it's just a regulation. So we wanted to clarify with CVC as to where the regulation limits are and what their thoughts were. They've indicated they've got concerns and want to go out on site and meet. I don't know how much relevance that has. They've developed their trails and their washroom facilities right up beside the lake. Obviously, you know, there's opportunity there. What I'm suggesting is the site that is the current site, I think it's called AA, that was been provided, and that's right down in as low as you can get into that valley by the trees. You do end up on the lot line. There is a minimum setback requirement of 9 meters for a structure in the rural area. These lands are not zoned open space because they came in after the subdivision plan, if you will. They were left rural, as were the homes around it. There is a 9-meter setback required for structures, and we're suggesting that a 9-meter setback minimum, or even maximum, if you will, from that tree line would provide not only some setback, meet the setback requirements of the zoning, provide some ability for maintenance in behind the fenced area, the tennis courts, may reduce some of the length and steepness of slopes for access for people with disabilities. But I think if you worked from the 9-meter setback, that would be the appropriate place to start. It's to give you an idea, from the zero line setback to where we were with the Burnside proposal was 60 feet. So 30 feet or 9 meters is roughly from the wall behind me to the corner of Councillor Martin's desk, just to give you an idea how far you'd be looking at pushing it from the fence line.
What I want to know from that, I mean, I'm looking at a drawing, and I can't tell if it's got the 9 meters. Does that push the whole tennis court too far to the south? Does it start now to intrude, like how, I don't know.
You're probably right in between where the Burnside proposal was and where the AA proposal is sitting right now. It's sitting at 0 feet. The Burnside proposal was sitting at about 60 feet. So you're almost halfway between the two.
Yes.
Do we have the mics up a little bit? Some of those old fellas don't
Sir,
like to listen.
I have a number of comments to make. First, having to do with the letter that we received from the CVC. This is the kind of information we should have had back in September, and it could have easily been asked for back in September and in front of us when we made the original decision to locate the tennis court where we did. But it's a late arrival, and it seems directed specifically at the AA location, when in reality, I think all 3 locations that are currently proposed, notwithstanding our previous decision, would be affected by having to get a permit from the CVC. Is that correct, Mark?
The whole property is regulated. I mean,
Exactly.
all that area is regulated.
Exactly, but AA, for whatever reason, seems to be singled out here.
That, the proposal as we put forward, as we push forward to the property line and that copse of trees there,
Okay.
we wanted to get additional information from CVC. We always knew we'd need permits for the work that's in there because both the south side and the north side of that park and actually part of the east side are regulated by CVC. So wherever you went, you'd need a permit. And they're not saying you can't do it. They're saying, we want to
Yeah.
go out on site
That's
and
understood.
discuss with you what we're going to require. They're going to require erosion control. They're going to require, their standard requirements. Let's go through. I think they're more concerned with the parking area on the south side of the lot in proximity to that drainage feature that goes into Island Lake.
Well, the parking is there already.
Right, but we do have to push into that area a bit to create more parking.
Or go closer to the road, which is, I think Paul's position is he doesn't want it encroaching down towards the end of his property line.
Towards the end of his lane, yeah. But that also requires a permit, and they're flagging that as well. So they're not just flagging the one.
So in terms of the setback from the property line, if we were to decide to leave it exactly where it is, what would we have to do as a municipality? Would we have to apply for a minor variance ourselves?
Oh, that's kind of the issue. I mean, no, a public use is permitted in any zone. You should be trying to meet the same standards you'd make anybody else meet in the municipality. I wouldn't encourage you to be going beyond what setbacks are required for other people in the rural zone.
My concern is that a lot of thought and effort and sweat and tears went into this process, and we made a decision, and it comes back to us changed, which was a surprise to me. And obviously AA is down in the lowest portion of the property, which is where I think the majority of residents wanted to see any tennis court. Low for a number of reasons, not the least of which would be light issues associated with it. And I would be hesitant to agree to anything that now moves the tennis court further to the south. I think it's situated at its best location now in AA. I do not understand for the life of me the suggestion of up to 300 meters of retaining wall. I think this can be done fairly basically. Of course, if we put that into any tender spec, we're going to get a quote back that says it's going to be an extra $200,000. But I'm not satisfied that we've explored the cut and fill opportunities here. I think it's really critical that we get the orientation of the tennis court right for a whole bunch of reasons, not the least of which have to do with sunlight and comfort of playing. And I know that Mr. Soden has weighed in on this, and Ralph has weighed in on it as well. In looking at the drawings, I have a problem with the extended trail, which seems to be a nice leisurely curved affair down to the tennis court. I think that can be shortened up to save money. I have to agree with the suggestion made with regard to the washroom. I've felt uncomfortable about where it was. I don't think it's a hill to die on, but it would be nice if it was further down towards the entrance to the Vicky Barron Trail. As I say, I'm still of the view that that if we have to spend a little extra money to make certain that this tennis court is located where we, as council, determined that it should be, that is reasonable. But I am very concerned with something that is adding $200,000 to an original estimated cost of $250,000. And further, all three options that are before council tonight have seemingly attracted additional costs over and above the original $250,000, if I'm not mistaken.
Council requested that we put the tennis courts roughly in the area which is called AA, which is in front of the trees. And the reasons for that were multiple. The trees themselves are a very good source of windbreak, which is an important thing for tennis. It can still go there, but not exactly there. We don't need to build retaining walls. We can do this by cutting and fill. I don't think any of us had realized that was being considered that we would locate this at the same ground level as the trees. And there's no reason why that needs to be done, and that creates a lot of expense. It puts the tennis courts down 10 or 12 feet below the level of the playing field, which is, I don't think makes good sense. So if it was done with a cut and fill proposal, we'd take the soil from the high areas and move it to the low areas. We could probably put the tennis courts at a depth which was about half as deep, maybe 1.5 meters. Since Mike Dunmore is the expert in this area, I conferred with him last week, and I think it'd be better if he discussed that possibility. Is that something you could do, Mike?
Brett, is there any chance you can put it up on the screen?
We're having problems with
Okay.
put it up, but it flickers a lot.
And I know Mark was prepared to talk to this as well. So if you put the tennis court on the edge of the trees, which you won't be able to do because you'll have to respect the drip line anyway, so you're talking a couple meters away. When I stood at the bottom, there's the screen there now. So when I stood at the bottom on the edge of the tree row, and Kim and I believe John Krillman was there as well, or was it Sean from RGB? I did not look level at the feet of the people that were standing there. I'm 1.8 meters high. I was definitely 2 to 3 meters below the people standing at that top of the hill. So in order to put the tennis court at that elevation, you're looking at a 3-meter cut. It was more excessive than what we wanted. That was why staff brought to council a moved location. We know it was not received well by council a meeting ago, so we've come back to exactly where council was. In putting it exactly where council had received it a couple of months ago, you do need the retaining walls. The length of them still be determined by a detailed design, which we have not got to yet. In discussions with Councillor Manktalo, we looked at a cut and fill design, a potential of moving the tennis courts up so the retaining walls could be minimized and or disappear altogether. You can reshape the lane. This is where the permit comes in. As Mark explained, you'd need a CVC permit irregardless of what we did on this property. As you start to raise the tennis court up and remove some fill from where the sun shelter is right now attached to the tennis court, So you would do some cutting in that area. You would regrade the areas around it, soft sloped into the tennis court. You still end up with a drop off into the tree line. But as you do that, you start to, we need the permission of council to provide us the opportunity to move this tennis court around a little so we can construct this. These are large machines, but that's something that we can definitely iron out if council gives us approval on the general location that it stands today. We can prepare the tender, we can prepare the detailed design, we can provide it probably, Kim has an estimate, I believe, of 30,000 for earthworks. That can be swallowed up by the existing quote that was provided to council originally with the elimination of the retaining wall. And it's believed, and I'm comfortable in saying that we can get that tennis court to work there without retaining walls, without the elongated slope. We still have to respect the AODA. Like we can't start to shorten or increase slope to save money when we need to respect the percentages, right? But it's truly believed by myself that if council gives us a little leniency, 10 to 20 feet, to shift and move this around, we can, through cut and fill and exterior grading, we can make this work in the general area. And this is where Ralph and I got to the point. And I asked Ralph, are we trying to hide the tennis court, or are we trying to build a tennis court in the back of this property? Because if we're trying to hide it, then we need to bury it, and we need to put the retaining walls in. If we're trying to build a tennis court that's respectfully away from the neighboring properties, utilizing some of the tree line for some wind block, then if you were to provide staff with the flexibility to fit this in, we could engineer it and get it in with limited impact to the budget that was submitted privately.
Does that bring it, are you thinking it's going to come further south?
Well,
When
you
I
have to
look at-
imagine, if we took all the fill from where the brown, that's a horrible connection tonight. If we took all the fill from where the brown sun shelter is and we push it towards the tree line, and we're now going to create a ledge or a shelf that would need to have a large slope down. So as we pull it a little bit to the south, we start to rise up the hill a bit. We have less cut to level out the area. The retaining walls get removed because we're able to grade on the slope, and we also will have to push to the west a little bit to allow us to grade in between the trail, the corner of the playing field, and the most easterly corner of the proposed tennis court. So we just need this approval from council for us to, we're sticking to a sketch that was drafted back in Christmas, and we brought back something different last week, and it was wrong. We know that now, but now we've put it exactly where you want it, and we're telling you that it needs retaining walls. So if you just give us the leniency, I hope, we can engineer this into that location.
And, sorry, and just one point to Mike's comment, and it dealt with the windy pathway down, and the lower you get, you're making it very, very difficult to provide for accessibility for people with disabilities. And the large loop is basically to get a proper grade down there. And as I understand it, that's still at about 7% grade, which is still pretty steep to get a wheelchair down there, and more so back up.
Okay, John?
Can I just confirm that what you're saying, Mike, isn't a pitch for tennis court location CC, which is quite a lot to the west?
No, I would say,
It's not that far?
no, I would think that reasonably, depending on how, Ralph and I were sort of thinking, move 50% of the hill from one side to the lower side, and then start to work our platform there. We'd have some B gravel that would need to be brought in before that. But where it is shown on CC is way beyond what I believe would be, well, it's just way beyond it. I don't think we need to do that. We would do it to a point where it would be a nice slope from the walkway down to a couple feet away from the tennis court, a couple meters, so we could get a drainage, we're gonna need some drainage around it, and get it down there. And I would think that you'd probably be looking at 20 feet south and 20 feet to the west, above our 30, depending on how we decide to deal with the zoning setback.
CC has absolutely no windbreak in some bars.
CC is way out, right?
And it's also in an area which I think would really attract the attention of the Credit Valley Conservation Authority, given the fact that it's very natural down there and it is that much closer to the trail and the water, the body of water. Don't get me wrong about the Serpentine Trail loop. I understand the need to have appropriate grades for purposes of wheelchairs and so forth. But, we're not trying to win a design award here. We're trying to get something built with a responsible budget, and I think we just have to bear that in mind. We're not giving carte blanche to landscape architects and construction companies. I think we just have to get this done, and done in a responsible fashion. So that's my position. If it means moving it a few feet, I guess we have to go with that, but not dramatically to the south, because that then attracts the attention of people who argued very, very vehemently that it should be more or less in the location of AA.
So respectfully noted, for sure. So would council be comfortable with providing approval for us to finalize our detailed design, subject to the fact that council would like to see the tennis court as northerly as possible, utilizing the existing hedgerow for windbreaks? Council would furthermore like to see no retaining walls in that expense, in the expense associated with that, which may shift the tennis court to the west a little bit and allow grading and change of grade of the land around the southern area to ensure that, once again, to ensure that no retaining walls were present. What that would enable council to receive from staff now is we'd be able to get our tender done, we'd be able to get the cut and fill calcs done, we'd be able to provide direction to Burnside to finalize the drawings, and that would, now we're into, council will see exactly where it lies with those notations of trying to get that as far north as we can without retaining walls.
Councillor Macdonald.
Well, I'd like to speak to that. I think that this is the right direction to go. We get away from what are relatively ugly retaining walls, which are going to be surrounding this like a prison, and instead we get into banks or berms, which are grassed and pleasant. I think it's going to be a spectacular location, and I think, John, without doing very much, it's going to be a spectacular location, right in that area close to the trees. So I think, I recognize what Mike is asking for. It's the kind of thing when your kid asks you, would you just let me do what I want to do and it'll be okay? But actually, given the parameters, I think that's the way to go. We want it to be lowered, but not that much. We want to be able to have grass banks rather than $120,000 retaining wall, and I think it can be done. I suspect it can be done just by moving it due south a little bit, and that gives you the 9-meter separation that Mark was talking about.
Okay, so with that in mind, would Mr. Dunmore and Mr. Simpson be able to craft a revised motion for us to consider? I don't, because only part of this motion now is going to apply, which is the approval for the Fieldstone Parkette. Mr. Dunmore?
So the sun shelter on the tennis courts, from what I'm in research and discussions with Kim, should be moved around to the west side, because play will be in a north-south way, and balls will enter the sun shelter. I know there's discussion over east side, west side, so Are we going to have nighttime play or not nighttime, but dusk time play or dawn type of play? But I would think that the west side of the tennis courts would be the appropriate location because the sun is hottest in the afternoon. But that's just my call or my opinion.
So Mike, to be clear, it's tilted a bit. Is that sitting at, between the tennis courts and the trees? Is that what you're referring to?
That's the dark brown.
No, I recognize what is
Sorry.
the shelter, but the siting of it, you're suggesting it be on the northwest side? I think that's wrong. I think that's wrong, John, Fred.
On the left side of the salmon-colored box.
I think the information that I have, which I circulated to all of you, and to be quite fair, I asked Mike Soden what his thoughts were, and he canvassed a number of people at other courts to get their feelings. And the feeling was that it could be facing east or facing west, but it certainly should not be facing northeast or northwest, because that's where the summer sun comes from. Have I got it right, Mike? So it would be ideal to be placed on the north east side of the courts there, and it would be geographically relatively easy to put it in there, and that would not be facing the setting sun, which is setting to the north of due west.
And
So these are new ideas to me, because I thought it should be down there.
right, well, I say east, let's say left or right. Left side of the page, being the west.
Can I point to it?
Yeah, I know where you're talking about. So you're talking about the right side of the tennis courts, so. So that's, the tennis courts will have to move away from the walkway that amount of distance then. It would hold roughly 4 picnic tables.
Well, after Ralph and I spoke last week, it'll probably hold 2 picnic tables as opposed to benches. And Mr. Sodden has provided us with pictures from other tennis facilities, and we would assimilate ours to similar to what he's shown us works at other tennis facilities, and that's 2 picnic tables, basically side by side, with some type of sun canopy over top of them.
So what we're really asking is to sort of let us go to detailed design. Council will see this detailed site plan back again. It'll show the slopes. It allows us to get the tender prepared, and that's your final. We'll engineer it to where it is most financially palatable by the budget that we've submitted, and take into account your considerations today with respect to shortening walkways to still satisfy AODA, and let us get something back in council's place, but giving us direction to go to detailed design.
And if I may, can Paul's concern about parking be addressed from the standpoint of ensuring that it,
I'm not sure what Mr. Seymour's, it's to scale. Yeah, it's drawn to scale, John, so I'm not sure what Mr. Seymour's recommending, but.
But I think if we can, Paul, as I understand it, what you're saying is you'd like to see the parking more towards the road than further down towards the.
When I originally measured, you need 9 feet for a legal parking spot. If you want 12, you need 108 feet. I always have to step back from the road. I get all that. My issue is, we're now past the end of my house. What we experience every night at 10 the other way, where you could probably put 3 spots, and the lot now holds more than 6 cars at the top property. It's only holding 6 cars because the issue that I raised, people are parking diagonally, they're parking sporadically when they pull in. Lines would correct a lot of that. That's why we suggested the first place to take it.
So subject to council's approval of those comments, we'd be happy to entertain and start to engineer that.
And just to Paul's comment about hours of operation of the lights on the tennis court, with respect, Paul, I think that that's a separate issue from some of these design issues that we're talking about tonight. But I think council should visit that issue at the appropriate time, and I agree with you that you know, I was the one who tried to get the lighting issues addressed, and council saw it differently. But I think we need to address it separately from tonight's discussion.
And my point was not just about lights, it was about, I think the park's hours should correspond with the CDC. If it's posted, that way if there is activity back there after 9:30, you have the ability for the police to actually take an action, right, and take a point action. Because right now, there are no rules. People can go back there whenever they want. So we should establish park rules are 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. or 9 p.m. or whatever it is that corresponds to CDC. That's what I'm supposing. And obviously the lights would correspond to that as well.
Was there support for council for that?
Well, we look at, yeah, so in other words, it's all different things that we want to see, so when it comes back, we can. Yes. Yes, Mike?
I just want to make it clear for the sheltered spectator area and the vesting area for the players, it needs to be on the side of the action. It can't be behind one of the courts, so however they're orientated, the sheltered seating has to be on the side. So we would want to be behind the action.
Yeah.
Because somebody serving 90 miles an hour could take them to the ball, right?
Great. Yep.
Or if I was playing, that would happen.
So, Mr. Sodden, that was the conversation between right, left, east, west. So, I don't know how to, anyway, north is up. Right to me is the east side of the tennis courts, and that's where Councillor Mengtelo had pointed. And that would be where that brown rectangular shape would be relocated. Play is from north to south. Up. So where it's shown right now is it needs to be moved. Correct.
The other left. It'll become apparent, I think. Okay, so let's see how this goes. That council approves the general location of option AA of the revised draft site plan for the Island Lake Family Park as detailed in the Director of Recreation's report dated February 6, 2020, and shall include and/or be subject to the following conditions. 1, associated in-ground infrastructure for pathway lighting be included. Not illuminated, but just included. 2, minimize cut and fill requirements. 3, meet minimum side yard setback, 9 meters. And be located at this location as a preferred maximum 9-meter setback. Is that right? Okay.
Yeah, we're trying to keep it as tight as possible
Yeah.
to that limit. We're not trying to push it, you know, east, west as far as
Right.
possible. We're trying to respect where council wants it and at an elevation that we can get it to and still do the work to get it there.
Okay. So 4, minimize or eliminate retaining walls. 5, shorten walkways to meet AODA standards. 6, southerly parking lot to be as far east as possible, not west of existing residence. 7, hours of operation limited to same as Island Lake Conservation Area. And that council approves the draft site plan for Fieldstone Parkette as shown in the Director of Recreation's report dated January 22nd, 2020. And then staff proceed with the issuing of the request for proposal for these 2 parks. Or not.
So, did council have a discussion on limiting the hours? I didn't hear a general consensus on council side. I thought that was a bigger picture.
Okay. Okay, so we will strike number 7 at this point and have that discussion once we've determined what we're doing as far as placement and whether or not that can be considered. I think it should be something that we considered because equity, we need to have all of our parks to be equally confined to operating hours, et cetera. So depending on what the uses are. So let's have that discussion another time. Okay?
And then the last one was that you have a comment about RFP there. And I think what I was trying to say to council, and I hope this is what you heard, was that staff be directed to go to detailed design and prepare the RFQs
Okay.
for release, subject to submission of one more site plan.
Okay.
Because I need to design,
No.
we need to design these cut and fills now,
Yeah.
so we know exactly what the
Okay, so
least financial impact is.
I hear you. So get
Okay.
back to and that staff proceed with the,
Detailed design and RFP preparation. Once the final site plan is brought to council. I think that raises the comfort level of council, and I think it puts staff in a position where we've got a engineered set of drawings to finalize the location of the tennis courts.
okay. So the last paragraph, that staff proceed with the detailed design and RFP preparation once the final plan has been provided to council. Okay. So,
You may hate me for this, but could you read it all again? Seriously?
Okay.
It's complicated.
all right. So that council approves the general layout of option AA of the revised draft site plan for Island Lake Family Park as detailed in the Director of Recreation's report dated February 6, 2020, and shall include and/or be subject to these following conditions. 1, associated in-ground infrastructure for pathway lighting be included. 2, minimize cut and fill requirements. 3, meet minimum side yard setbacks, 9 meters, and be located at this location as a preferred maximum 9-meter setback. 4, minimize or eliminate retaining walls. 5, shorten walkways to meet AODA standards. 6, southerly parking lot to be as far east as possible, not west of the existing residence. and that council approves the draft site plan for Fieldstone Parkette as shown in the Director of Recreation's report dated January 22nd, 2020, and that staff proceed with the detailed design and RFP preparation once the final plan has been provided to council.
Is this understood? What about moving the shelter to the east side? Do you understand that, or should that be in the motion?
Can you please put it in the motion?
Okay, so then that's number
And I
7.
think that Kim needs the Fieldstone, because you're approving the Fieldstone Parkette. So that can be let, that RFP can be let.
Okay, so
And the note on detailed design and engineering should be referencing the Island Lake Family Park.
Since it's tilted about 45 degrees, I think you should say the northeast side. There's a southeast and a northeast side, to be
Okay.
clear.
And, what's it called again? The
It's the northeast side they wanted here.
tennis
That's right.
shelter?
That's where we had it.
Be located on the northeast side.
This is the northeast. And that's where it's going to have to
If I could just ask a point of clarification on the Fieldstone Parkette. Kim, Mike, on the Fieldstone Parkette, is that being viewed as a completely separate undertaking, separate tender, separate RFP? Or are there elements of that job that can be rolled into Island Lake to get some economies?
Mike and I have discussed that, and we feel that option B is the better way to go with the, to let the RFPs go together so that we get economies of scale with them.
Your Honor, could we clarify the trail lighting? We had, trail lighting was placed there by Kim originally. Our deputy mayor asked that we decrease the amount of trail lighting, but I don't think we ever requested we get rid of it.
What I thought we decided on, and just to put the conduit in so that at what point in the future we could illuminate it, just the same way as what we were going to do originally with the tennis courts.
So I would speak respectfully against that. I think that we do need some trail lighting for safety purposes. And the trail lighting that Kim had suggested, which is low, same things that are outside here along the walkway coming into the town office. And they are unobtrusive, and they provide some lighting along the trail. And I think that we should stay with that. Whether we put in 6 or 10, I'm not sure. What you wanted 6, John, I think.
But I thought that at the last meeting, we had determined that we would delay the illumination of the trail lighting. We would just put the conduit in, do everything else because of the construction. And we can always choose to illuminate it 2021 budget in whatever fashion. But I just think at this point, because we were trying to get ourselves in a position for RFQs, RFPs, and site designs, that was as far as we could go without arm wrestling it out.
I beg your pardon, Madam Mayor. I'm going to refer to the minutes of the September 10th meeting where a motion was carried that quote-unquote lightings of pathways and parking be stricken from the concept plan. We were very shocked that staff actually thrown it back in there, and I think that was the point of discussion at the January 28th meeting, is that why is it back again?
Yep.
When we told you not to put it there. So again, we shouldn't even be talking about it at the very least, because it was a motion that was carried not to include it in the concept plan.
And I do appreciate your memory on the minutes. The thing is that at this point, this council will only be in place for another 3 years. and new council members will, more than likely will be voted in. And we want to be prudent looking forward to the future so that if this park does become a very active place for the community and there is concerns about safety, then we don't have to rip up all the walkways and go through all the process of construction again. So that's where we had ended up with that discussion, that in taking staff's advice about preparing for the option of lighting at a future date. So,
Respectfully, Madam Mayor, the concerns around safety did not have to do with whether people could walk and find their way to the park at night. They always had to do with the fact that this is a park that is not patrolled and not visible from the street by police. So it sets it aside from any other park that we have in Mono and should be an exception to the rule of bringing people back there and letting them find their way at night because no one can see. Sean Waters brought it up as well about, you know, people back there in the dark, out of sight, out of mind. There's no reason for anyone to be back there in the dark. These are the problems that we have addressed as a safety concern of the community, and we have already, you know, observed and seen many instances where the OPP has no appetite to patrol this park and answer the calls that we have made on numerous occasions, citing nefarious activity with them.
I was the one that moved the motion to strike out lighting. Having said that, I suspect that we will be running power to the tennis court anyway, probably along the same route as the path. So I don't see the difficulty in having the conduit there, but the decision to add lights would be, I think, a separate and hotly debated topic for the future. But if the decision of council, and I hope it would not be the decision of council to add in lighting on the path or in the parking lot, it would minimize the cost of doing so. But I won't be supporting the lighting of either the parking lot or the path. And I suspect that the hours of operation of the park will take care of that issue, you know, in the meantime. So I don't see the harm. In fact, I think it's good planning that we have at least the conduit and the power, and we do have to run power to the tennis courts regardless.
okay. Clear? Okay. So, we've had the motion read twice. I need a mover. Moved by Martin, and a seconder. Second by Magtalo. Any further discussion? All in favor? That carries. Okay, so on to number 4, the Ritchie fill application update. We have a report from Mr. Trotman regarding bylaw enforcement.
This provides council with a bit of an update. Did you want to speak to this, Mark? Or?
No, go ahead.
Just with respect to some of the existing fill that was put on the site.
Can you put your
Yes, it's on.
microphone closer to you?
Oh,
or,
sorry, is
or
that
do
better?
do the button that on the right-hand side.
How's that?
No, a little
Oh,
there.
I'm getting the feedback. Can you hear me?
Yeah?
Okay. So there was, this was a prelude to the application that came before council, or committee, I guess, as well, 21st, 28, from Mr. Ritchie, down on the 4th line. And there was some filling activity that occurred preceding the application he submitted. This is just a brief memo to update council, and it provides the enforcement activity that Mr. Laming provided to the town at that time. Since then, they've reflected on comments made at both meetings, committee and council. And they did actually give me an email earlier this evening rather, to indicate that they are in a holding pattern. They're going to look at all the comments and examine their film management plan and probably revise it, try to address the comments, and come back to committee at a later date. So that just provides a bit of an update with the Ritchie application.
I had, this became news to me at the last council meeting. I admit now that I've got the minutes from the Planning, Environmental and Natural Heritage Committee, that it was discussed there too, but I was unaware of that until I got this agenda package. But my question at the last council meeting was, does the fact that the applicant was bringing in fill without a permit affect the current application? And I think I got an answer, no. But my own feelings are, unless or until we know what was brought in there and whether it's been tested or not, surely we as a council have a right to say, we're not going to entertain any further applications until what you've done in the past has been checked and made known to us.
Right now, pardon me? Go ahead. Yeah, well, they're being addressed as related but separate items, if you will. So whether there's enforcement with respect to the fill that's there, and separately, of course, the application for further fill have both been at least reviewed, are both in front of council now, have been reviewed from council, and they want to come back and make further comments to update both. So in fact, the fill management plan is to address this matter as well. As
Prior placement of fill.
Correct, yeah.
Without a permit.
Correct. We haven't seen it yet, but that they are aware of that requirement.
And I think your comments are fair game, Fred, to forward back to them as council's position that we will not entertain this further until you provide us with that. No, I'm stating that is a fair comment to go from council, and it's something, it's a policy we're looking at putting right into the fill bylaw. Any amendments to the fill bylaw say that if you place fill in the property, we're not going to entertain an application. And by the way, your fees just doubled. The county does that now with their building permit fees.
I see these as two separate things. The report of the bylaw inspector dated March 5th seems to have been triggered by a observation from the roads department that truckloads were going into this property. And he attended and discovered that this activity was going on. There had been 10 truckloads go in that day. The admission apparently was that they were trying to get 40 loads in that week. And they were put on notice that, you know, they were in violation of the fill bylaw. Next attendance is not until June 25th. And to quote the bylaw inspector, he says he's, meaning the property owner, he's a long way from being finished. So I would wonder whether or not between March 5th and June 25th there was work going on in there. It certainly seems as if there was, to the extent that there's an admission that 35 to 40 loads had been taken into the property, and some 40 loads of material, including stumps and various other things, was removed from the site. Interestingly, apparently, some real estate agent said that this was okay. Please help us with real estate agents. And I'm not seeing any indication here of a cease and desist order. I'm not seeing anything other than an attempt to make this right by encouraging the property owner to make an application after the fact. That does not, in my view, correct the situation. And I think that charges should be laid.
So I guess what I'm saying is going to back you up, John. We look at the March the 5th letter from Eugene Lamberting, who's our bylaw officer, and he says in the middle of the third paragraph, I explained no more than 25 loads this year were allowed, period. Seems pretty clear to me. Next time we hear from him is on June the 29th, and I'm reading from his email. I hope. And he says that I spoke to Mr. Paul Ritchie along with his contractor, John Lalakos, and they explained they had brought in about 35 to 40 loads of fill. So despite being told that they were limited to 25, they went in and brought another 10 to 15 loads of fill. And no charges were laid. I don't understand it. This is a flagrant disregard for our bylaw, and charges should have been laid at that time.
Okay, so in Mr. Trotman's report, at the bottom of the page, the recommendation is, should council wish staff to move to laying charges at this time, direction would be requested. So we need...
I understand why you're asking that. My concerns are twofold. Number one, I don't think the bylaw inspector should be coming to council every time he wants to lay charges. The bylaws are there, they should be enforced. And so, you know, I think we've been remiss in not enforcing this bylaw in this instance if these allegations are in fact correct. And they are just allegations. And the property owner deserves his day in court to answer to the charge. My second concern is that well, it really comes back to the fact that we have to start enforcing our bylaws. And you know, this is not a question where you have a nice little social visit and tell them to knock it off, and then come back a couple of months later and find out that not only have they not knocked it off, but there's still grading on that property, there's still activity going on that property, and then they're encouraged to try and fix it up by making an application after the fact. That does not correct the initial issue, in my view. And it's no way of addressing the issue of whether that fill that's been dumped there has been properly tested. We should be doing something through the system to ensure that that fill is tested. I've seen a video of the berm. It is substantial. It is substantial what's already gone in there, and troubling and concerning.
They have been instructed to demonstrate, well, notwithstanding the aspect of charge, they have been instructed to demonstrate that the fill that was in there is clean, and if it's not, it would be subject to
Demonstrate as part of their current application before the municipality?
Well,
or
because
as separate and apart from, because I don't want it conditioned on us granting
Correct, I get that.
an
Yeah, yeah.
application that they then go in and test what they've already brought in.
Yeah.
If the Ritchies bring in their own people to test it, they're gonna have more of a, they're gonna obviously want the fill to be clean, and they're gonna want to show it's clean. Why don't we get some independent testers in to test it, and charge the Ritchies, since they're the ones that brought in the fill in the first place?
We'd have to go through that process. Would be subject to Jim's review.
There's precedent for that question.
Yeah.
From March to June, you had a bylaw officer in here in June, a neighbor had called for all the trucks going away. There's more than 40 truckloads.
Yeah. There's 100 loads, there's 100 loads of fill in there. It's a big.
Why were they not instructed in June? This is February. This happened in June, and the town bylaw officer was there. Why were they not instructed at that point to have the soil tested?
money, obviously. So
Appropriate
what,
action,
he made money on all those,
necessary.
the fill that he brought in.
That means
Now
labeling
pay
a
it,
charge.
make him
Does it?
remove it, and he pays it.
Is to how wording of this, or, maybe we should first, yeah. So the necessary action means getting,
He's writing a motion for us to consider on this item.
the mayor asked me to write a motion, I got a little stuck up on the wording, okay?
I believe there is a precedent for an owner being forced to
Yeah,
take
maybe it's good enough, so you can leave
from
two
an
rights,
area
and then we did
in
that.
around Alliston a couple of years ago. And back in the head, I'd have to look it up in the paper.
Okay.
But he was making the jump from the development of the new subway system in downtown Toronto and all this kind of crap. So, there's precedent for this action.
Okay, resolve that as per our bylaw enforcement officer's report of March 5th, 2019, June 25th, 2019. There apparently has been a flagrant violation of our fill and site alteration bylaw, and that staff proceed to take the necessary actions to eliminate this, implement this direction. Did you want to say anything else about?
No, it's worded vaguely because in the first instance, staff might want to seek legal advice, okay? But if that leads to a charge, I was going to write in lay a charge, but I think first staff should check with our lawyer.
Here's the difficulty, Fred, and that is that we don't meet for another month. So it's one more period of time that fill is sitting there unattended.
That bylaw doesn't, that resolution doesn't delay.
Just give staff authorization to phone a lawyer and say,
It doesn't even say deal with the lawyer. It says take the necessary action to lay the charges and implement your direction.
Well, I for one want to know if the advice is that we don't charge. And because
We would
I'm
certainly
gonna
bring that back
I'm
to
gonna have
council.
I'm going to have an opinion about that, but you bring it back to council a month from now. That's my issue. You know, I'd be satisfied if we are informed by way of email as to our lawyer's reaction to this. But if it takes a special meeting of council to direct that charges be laid, I'd be in favor of doing that between now and our next regularly scheduled meeting.
I believe,
As I said earlier, I don't think it should take council to green light each and every charge under our bylaw scheme. It shouldn't come to that.
and fair enough. And the discussions that I'd had is laying charges when you do have an active application in place. Okay, there's that whole good faith, bad faith argument. I have no problem with the resolution Fred has written in proceeding with that. It doesn't delay. It says, do it, lay charges and move on. I think the only way we would be coming back to council is if we receive direction or a comment from either our prosecutor or our lawyer that you know, we shouldn't be. And I don't see that coming.
Well, I hope not. And as for good faith, bad faith, I certainly hope that the Ritchies were not led to believe that they could make this all good by filing an application for a fill permit, because it does not make it all good.
And I think even in the bylaw enforcement officer's report, he said, this is not going to look good. Like when you come through to council, right? I mean, Eugene's a fairly easygoing guy, but he gets the job done and he sees the operation. So in that regard, I think, you know, with his notes, we can move and lay those charges. What I don't know and what I need to talk to Eugene is whether the 40 loads referenced in that second email in June refer to the 40 loads that were being brought in March.
Okay.
I would think in this case, we'd be looking for the fine, instruction to either remove the material or at least prove the veracity of the material. And it's going to go somewhere else, Bob, sorry.
My sensing on this, council could pass a motion right now directing this man not to take any more fill in there. He didn't listen to the bylaw officer. Now he's gonna get the directive directly in writing from the council. Then we go to the lawyers and stuff like that. Because right now he's laughing at you.
Well,
He's done it for
yeah.
6 months.
okay.
And-
So lay it out right now.
So this is what is being requested of, so this is what this motion is giving staff, this is giving staff the direction that we want to see this charges laid. And I think we also need to ask for some update as to how to proceed with the testing of and/or removal of the soil that was brought in.
And that was the third comment I was going to make to Mr. Mitchell, is the potential to allow us to go onto the property to test the soils. We don't have the right to go onto people's property and just test their soil, test their water. We do usually require a court injunction to get there and/or a charge and direction from the courts.
You're going to pick the tester, right?
Yes, yes.
If we can get that through the courts, yes.
Okay. So it's understood then with this motion. So can I have a mover? Moved by Creelman and seconded by Martin. All in favor? Carries? Has,
Was that, is that in place? Has he done cease and desist?
If there's any indication of importation of fill or significant earthworks going on in there, I think the neighbors should contact our staff immediately. And at that point, obviously, I think we're in a position to do something. I have not heard of anything recently, but if there's any hint whatsoever that he's going ahead and continuing to work on that property, and it's not simply the importation of fill, because our bylaw also addresses moving earth around on a site, and cutting trees, and thank you. Is there any investigation of the allegations that our tree bylaw was violated?
It's natural heritage. It's also, you know, the claim is it's an agricultural use, and our tree bylaw does not preclude agricultural use in tree removal. I mean, that's the argument that's being made. Horse tracks, horse husbandry is part of OMAFRA's definition of agriculture. So he's removed trees, but our bylaw is very clear that it was never the intent that it would preclude agricultural use.
It's in the bulletin, 851 from OMAFRA.
Could I make a modest suggestion in view of the fact that the trees seem to be removed pursuant to an activity that was not sanctioned, that issue be put to our legal people to see whether or not there is something that we can follow up on there. I mean, I understand the exemption for, quote, agricultural purposes, but when the essential activity is not sanctioned by way of a proper permit, I wonder whether it's proper.
okay. Thank you. Well, now we've given direction.
I still think that there should be a directive to remove the material.
Well,
It was brought in illegally, take it out. Take it out.
and so because staff has the direction now to enforce the bylaw, that will be part of the discussion that they will be having in terms of what can be done through the courts, et cetera. So at this time, we're at practically 8:45. Do we want to take a break? We did? Yeah. Okay. So 10-minute break then?
And this is for complete application. I've given you a bit more information than you need just to give you a bit of context. But I think there's ample information provided by the applicant to allow this application to proceed under the Plan Act requirements for a zoning amendment proposal.
Okay. Any questions from council regarding the report? Yes?
Mr. Trotman, I don't know much about microbreweries. I'm not against them, but can you come forth for the next time we discuss this or now and tell us a little bit about what the possible environmental implications are, such things as water use, smell, other things like that?
Right, so that will be part and part, if council deems this application complete. There are a body reports that have already been submitted. They may require further information, and they will weigh in on odor, water taking, and they're listed there on page 2, actually. And there may be other reports required as part of a normal circulation of an application of this type.
I had a question about the concept drawing, trying to pull it up here, but it looks like there's a lot of car parking spaces here. Can you explain that to me?
I think I don't have it on my copy, but I have seen the plan, obviously. They've shown an allocation for parking, so past where the driveway is and where this facility would be, I believe the parking's in behind, but we don't have a numbers count yet. I don't know that, though, is going to be, well, I don't think it's going to be an issue. The site's large enough where modest parking could be accommodated on site, and we'd have to look at what a bylaw requirement provision might be for that as well.
It's kind of vague, kind of blurry, but I've counted 18 parking spaces, which I don't think you need for your staff. So are we anticipating an additional development?
They, as part of the pre-consultation, they gave an upset limit of, it was a fairly modest number of barrels per week. So we haven't weighed in on the parking standards at this point in time. Go ahead, Mark.
I was just going to say, these are questions you should be reserving for the applicant in the public process. What you're doing tonight is just confirming that the application is complete in terms of the documents that have been submitted for your review to set the public process in motion and to confirm the timing under the Planning Act.
It's just a concept plan, so it's not really a site plan under the site plan control process yet.
So we have a motion that council deems zoning bylaw amendment application file ZBA 2020-01 as being complete pursuant to section 34, bracket 10.4 bracket of the Planning Act, and that the Director of Planning is instructed to commence with processing file ZBA 2020-01 pursuant to the requirements of the Planning Act. Can I have a mover? Martin, and seconded by Creelman. Any further discussion? All in favor? Carries. And the next is the draft bylaw for the Highway 9 water main extension. Yes.
On the public process, when do the neighbors of this particular proposal for microbrewery, when are they advised that there's an application? I strongly feel that they should know now that this is happening.
Well, now we've deemed the application complete. That's part of the process that Mr. Trotman will go to in terms of setting up public meetings and advertising.
Right, so that's the first step in the process, Bob, is to actually receive it as a complete application on the Planning Act. So we will now process it accordingly within the guidelines set out in the Planning Act and give the proper notice. There'll be a planning committee meeting set up with their schedule and then the council schedule. That'll all go out to the immediate neighbors, be posted online as well. I would say probably 60 to 90.
60 to 90.
As a general rule.
Trying to short circuit people getting all upset when they hear a rumor, it might be better to let them know that.
Yeah, there will be, I mean, we have to discuss that with the applicant. There's some options under the Plan Act for what the forms of circulation are, but one of them certainly within 120 meters of anyone in the area. Often there's a notice sign put on the property, and it certainly would be on our website, under that webpage.
And I think if you followed the Greenwood applications, we actually had that start to finish. All the reports that have been submitted are put up online. So there'll be full access to the reports that are there, and we're doing the same with the Ritchie Phil application as well. So.
Yeah, this one will have regular reports tabled to the webpage.
Okay, so the draft bylaw for the Watermain extension. Councillor Nix?
I just wanted to ask a question after I got through all the whereas clauses. This probably is a dumb question, Mike, but I'm assuming because you were passing a, what do you call it, a local improvement act, that some of the landowners, I know most of the landowners were willing to say, here's our share of the cost, right? Are we passing this bylaw because some of the landowners weren't willing to pay for this water main?
No,
Is that why it's necessary?
The bylaw at this time is to put it on the public record. I think to date, we've been explaining to council that this is in the works. We've been dealing with the landowners. So what the bylaw is doing this time is directing staff to go out, tender the project, and move on. We know that we have probably 6 to 8 landowners who are fully committed to the project, well more than a majority. We were going to proceed under a different section of the Municipal Act. That is based on frontage. We're not basing this on frontage because it doesn't matter how big your frontage is along Highway 9, you can only have the one use according to MTO. So it's been recommended we go through the Local Improvement Act. Once council approves the bylaw tonight, we will have Burnsides finalize the engineering for the project and tender it. When it comes back to council, you will have a firm amount based on a tender price. We will set a public meeting for all parties. We have to notify all parties that we're going through this process. They all know, but we have to do it formally under the local improvements regulation. And that will come back to council, and they will have certain rights. On the side of that, we've also been working with our bank as well to obtain financing, not so much for ourselves, but at a decent rate for the landowners who are going to choose to pay theirs over time. So it's the first start in the process. I mean, it's not the first step in the process. It's just so that it's on the record that council's aware of the project. We're going to be going through local improvements, and to give us the direction to finalize and tender the drawings. So the drawings are pretty much done. We've done all the locates with the various agencies. We're comfortable with the drawings as they are now. So.
Mark and I have been back and forth on this topic, and not to go into too much detail, but time is of the essence here in terms of getting this project finished and the water main commissioned. Local businesses are depending on this being expedited, and I would hope that Burnsides is given instruction that we absolutely have to move as fast as possible, because failure to do so could have consequences in the future. It's a very, very important improvement to that corridor of businesses, and I would hope that we have minimal delays, and that the line is commissioned and accessible to businesses along there. And I'll leave it at that, but you know where I'm going on that.
Yep. And quite frankly, I think this, for us, this is more CYA because we've already told Burnsides to move ahead as quickly as possible, so.
Well, and that, I'm glad to hear that the drawings are done, but, you know, if we can go to tender and if we can be ready to put a shovel in the ground as soon as we can get the frost out of the ground, I think it behooves us to go in that direction.
Okay, so we have a motion that we introduce and give the necessary readings to a bylaw to authorize the town solicitor and CAO to take the necessary steps under the Municipal Act 2001 and the Local Improvement Charges Regulation to determine the appropriateness of the construction of a water main along Highway 9 as local improvements and direct the town engineer and director of public works to finalize and tender the water main project, and that it be signed by the mayor and the clerk for the town of Mono, sealed and engrossed in the bylaw book. Moved by Micro and second by Martin. All in favor? Carries. Okay, so draft bylaw, Watermark, Aragon assumption. So,
Your Worship, you've got two bylaws before you. The first being a bylaw to assume the highways and grant final acceptance of the works that were completed within the Watermark Aragon subdivision, with the exception of the sewage treatment plant, which you're aware is currently under a separate lawsuit. So the bylaw has the effect of basically confirming and approving final acceptance for all of the works in there, with the exception of the sewage treatment plant. And also with the exception of the streetlights. There's how many? Six to eight streetlights in there that have been deemed to be on angle, and there's a payment of $5,000 required in there as well for that, and the town will look after that and go in and straighten them up. So that's essentially what this bylaw is doing. It's also maintaining a security level of $350,000. We're currently holding $500,000. We're not willing to reduce it beyond the $350,000 at that time. There are actually two lawsuits in place, which I believe Mr. Wilker had advised you. So the first one being the sewage treatment plant, which has multiple parties. We're holding, within that 350, we're suggesting that 250 be held at this time until that matter is resolved. The second matter is a lien construction lawsuit that we've been indemnified by Aragon, so they've been carrying that on our behalf. But again, it's about $60,000, and they've been going through the pre-hearing process, and once that's resolved, we could see that security coming down from 350 to 250. Mr. Page apologized for not being here. He is normally here when matters are dealt with his subdivision agreement, but he had previous commitments. He was actually hoping this would have been dealt with in January. So this has been vetted through the town solicitor, obviously, given the number of whereases you see, and we're comfortable with this moving ahead at this time. We've had discussions with the condo board as well. They're certainly aware that we're taking these steps at this time.
okay. Councillor Nix?
Yeah, these two documents were pretty long, and I'm not claiming to have got through all of it, but the part that intrigued me was the water allocation part of the second bylaw, I guess. As I understand it, and like this is quite, I'm okay.
If you're going to deal with that, you might want to deal with the bylaw first when you deal with the allocation, or do you want to deal with that as part, or do you want me to give you the background on the second bylaw as well?
Well, whenever you do it, I need some explanation about that part of these two bylaws.
Okay, so
Let's do the first one, and then we'll carry on to number 4. That we introduce and give the necessary readings to a bylaw assuming highways and accepting municipal works within the Aragon subdivision that be signed by the mayor and the clerk for the town of Mono, sealed and engrossed in the bylaw book. Moved by Micro and seconded by Creelman. All in favor? Carries. Okay, now, Mark, number 4.
The second is a bylaw, it just authorizes the execution of an agreement, similar to a site plan agreement. But the subdivision amending agreement is required because the original subdivision agreements, there were 4 actually, all in place, required the development of the commercial block prior to the town approving the final assumption. Obviously, we're 12 years into the development. We want an end point as well at a staff level. As part of that, an agreement is required to amend that particular section of the subdivision agreement. So what this does is basically say, starting at this point, is provide direction to Aragon and Mr. Page as to the timing that we want to see things done that haven't been completed. Again, notwithstanding the sewage treatment plant. So one of the issues is water allocation. So the previous bylaw said that if you haven't done or the previous agreement stated if you haven't constructed your commercial development at the time we grant final acceptance, then the town could withdraw the water allocation that was put in place for the commercial property. The water allocation at the time when the subdivision agreement was entered into was converted from commercial into residential units, and it came out to an amount of 75 units. Over time, as conditions have changed and requirements have changed through the Ministry of Environment, and we've seen changes in how you assess firm capacity and water capacity, we don't think that there is currently 75 units in there, but we are always continually looking at that water requirements for future use and for existing residents. So the water allocation provisions that are set out here are basically saying it's not an unlimited time that we're going to retain up to the 75 units. So we're going to provide you with a 5-year, we've been negotiating this back and forth over the last week, so what we've agreed to is to provide them with 5 years. However, if they do make the necessary applications, which we expect they will do for the commercial development of those lands, we will honor that allocation. If they don't, they lose that, and we can start providing that to any other potential landowners that are seeking development in the Cardinal Woods area. Right now, we don't have any potential users or people asking for it.
My question was going to be, and Mike, you remember when they did the study, and we have a water quantity threat on those well systems, and I wondered if that study that determined we have a water quantity threat had taken in this allocation in their calculations, so that's already been accounted for. So this isn't. What was the name of that study, Mike?
It was the Tier 3,
Yeah.
Tier 3 water quantity, and
So this 75 isn't above and beyond what that study was looking at, right?
if you recall that how the town of Mono, or at least my department, and I think Mark would agree with me, is that we never deemed that we don't have a perceptual water quantity issue. We can get into the basics of, based on maximum pumping values that the province has allowed us, would create a maximum pumping or a quantity issue, but we're not even, we're not getting close to those values. So our reality use of water is not where the Tier 3 had ended.
I understand that, but with this, that was with the current pumping, and going on memory, we're averaging about 25% of what we're licensed to pump, but on our maximum day, I think we hit a bit above 50%, so we're well below. In the study that said we had a water quantity threat, they were theoretically pumping the wells at 100%.
All the wells.
Yeah,
All the wells at the same time, and we're not, right now what has happened is,
But what I
wanted to know though is this allocation of what's equivalent to another 75
residential houses, that would be over and above what our pumping rates are right now.
It would be above the pumping rates, but it would certainly not be above our license rate. If you recall that we, the 3 or 4 wells, whatever they were, we could pump them, we can only pump them to a maximum, all 3 wells combined. Whereas the Tier 3 study took all of those wells and basically said, we're pumping them all at the same time, illegally, according, really under MOE guidelines. the actual limit that we can pump for those 3 wells, licensed limit, included this allocation.
And I think to help further understand that is, right now, we have 800 homes pulling from those wells in Cardinal Woods. To add 75 with that to a 25% permit to take water rate that we're using wouldn't get us to 100% capacity.
So if there's nothing further, we have a motion that we introduce and give the necessary reading to a bylaw authorizing the town of Mono to enter into an agreement with Aragon, Hockley Development Ontario Corporation, substantially in the form as attached as Schedule A to the bylaw, and that it be signed by the mayor and the clerk for the town of Mono, sealed and engrossed in the bylaw book. Moved by Martin, and second by Creelman. Any further discussion? All in favor? Carries. Okay, so we were tasked to find some topics for town hall meetings. And anybody think of any? Yes.
I think we should have a short session on understanding the plastic bag bylaw.
So,
I mean, it's straightforward now, but Fred and I both had to discuss it a fair bit to understand what the bags that it applied to.
so how imminent would you like this town hall meeting scheduled, or should we be looking at it for later on in the year because it won't be implemented until the 1st of
Ronnie,
January?
you're right as usual, later in the year.
And can we suggest a particular time, because the fall does get busy?
We should pick a date.
Saturday morning? Are you thinking October?
You thinking of it having 2, like having one now or in the spring and then one in the fall?
If there's another topic that we want to?
Can I suggest a friendly amendment? That it be on, and this is a county responsibility, but I think we should expand it to be a discussion about composting, recycling, and garbage. Because that topic is going to come up, and I Mark and I were at a meeting the other day, and I tried to raise it in the context of the service review, and it was sort of, well, yeah, it's a service, but, you know, it's going to be on a separate track. And I think that before the county enters into any new agreements with regard to waste management, that we locally have a good discussion about what we'd like to see, and try and convince the county of that direction, because my sense of the last go-around was that we all basically compromised to a standard of service that is maybe higher than what we actually need in a rural community, and we did so to accommodate our urban friends.
So we could pursue asking Scott Burns to come and present on the topic, and maybe he could bring some of his staff, like Melissa Kovacs, that does deal with the marketing side. And then we could also incorporate our update with the bylaw.
Fred could come and present on that.
Yeah. Would you like to do that, Fred? A Saturday morning?
So I'm here to serve.
Okay, so if we look at Saturdays, would we prefer to wait until after the Thanksgiving weekend?
Well, if we had it this following Saturday, the 17th, it'd be 1 week before the Hazardous and Electronic Waste Day, and that might tie in a little bit.
Okay, so let's pursue, and because of the sound system and the audio-visual, etc., I would suggest that we do it here, but it's up to council.
So what Saturday are we looking at?
The 17th,
Over.
Yeah, when's Thanksgiving? My
the
calendar just showed.
weekend before.
Oh,
12.
12.
And so I will ask Scott Burns about participating, and we will report back. And if there's any other burning issues, we can always schedule a further town hall meeting. Fair enough? Okay.
Good.
So now we're on to 2020 Waterworks budget review. And Mike?
So inside my report, I put together a few, sort of an idea for council on how we've run it, how we've been running the system with roughly about 80,000 capital per year, and that provided us the money that we needed to repair any of our failing assets and so forth. And I've gone on to talk about SCADA, and I'm prepared to go into SCADA as deep as council wants me to. It's really the bones of our water system. Right now we have 3 separate bones, we'll say. We have a Cardinal Woods SCADA system, we have an Island Lake SCADA, and we have a Coles Tower SCADA system. Coles and Island Lake generally talk to each other. Cardinal Woods sits as a standalone system. The software component of and the hardware components of the SCADA for our entire two systems have started to, are beyond their useful life. And we're currently, and you're going to chuckle out of this, but it's where it's gone, we're currently buying our data cards off of eBay to try and ensure that we can continue to run our system. Because what happens with SCADA is when they make it obsolete, they don't support it anymore. So we're able to run a good system, but we're not being supported by the actual people that build the SCADA system. So these parts become redundant to the software makers. They put them up for wholesale, and we're able, and this is happening in Ontario and Canada-wide, that people are bringing these systems across. And it's not funny. When I say that, it triggered, and this happened probably 5 years ago when this was displayed to me. It became a very serious discussion of our DWQMS meetings, which I've alluded to in the report here. We've constantly worked at trying to plan for this upgrade, which we're ready to do now. The Ministry of the Environment, or Parks and Climate Change now, has started to highlight some of our issues that we're having. We're starting to see some issues where we're losing some data. We're able to get it back, but we're starting to see the expected failures of our data collection. There's no potable water issues here, but we're definitely in a position now where it's time to upgrade. It's time to bring us into this 2020 year, and hopefully take us into 2030, 2035 with the upgrades that we're asking for. These are robust systems that will interlink all 3 drinking water systems. All the data and everything will be controlled back to town hall. So we've got our redundancy, we've got our interdiscussions amongst the two drinking water systems, and this provides our IT department with some great ability for prevention of hacking and so forth. Yes, Deputy Mayor. Okay, so this provides us our redundancy that we've been, so if we lose data at Cardinal Woods, we don't lose it because it's going to be at Island Lake, and it'll also be at Town Hall. There'll be a server put into the back room here for that. So with this comes security upgrades from a software or cyber issue. There also becomes building upgrades. There also building security upgrades. There also becomes a much more robust alarm system. Right now, for instance, we have alarm callouts, but with the current software that we have, it's very limited to tell us what the alarm is. So we could get an alarm that we could get an alarm at Cardinal Woods. It could be anything from the chlorinization has went off its correct dosing, or somebody dragged a leaf into the building and the heat turned on and has caused a motion sensor alarm. So irregardless of the 2 alarms, operators have to attend the plants. with the new SCADA system and software, these alarms are all uniquely identified. So we can tell if there's a chlorinization alarm. Just to help council feel better, if there is a chlorinization alarm and there's no chlorinization going into the water, everything shuts down. We will be able to manage this from remote access now. The operators that are on call will not have to attend. They will not have to attend for every alarm that rings out. They will be able to decide whether this alarm is we can wait till Monday morning, or whether we have to attend at this time. So, so basically, the SCADA is the bones of the water. It regulates and shuts off pumps, and it starts pumps, and it ensures that the permit to take waters are not. So if MW3 is starting to approach its maximum taking for the permit to take water, the system will automatically change to the other wells to ensure. So this is all done, right now this is all done manually. It causes quite a bit of potentials for operators to potentially have some errors. It starts to eliminate and is controlled by a mother computer, for lack of better words. We've tried to, we received some grant funding from the province in 2016. That was utilized to upgrade basically the degrading bell networks that are in our areas. And we've also went to some detailed design with respect to the engineering design of the SCADA. We've also had fiber put into the office, so that gives us our home run back to the office for our data storage. I'm in the process now, actually, we finalized a secondary grant application for the remainder of the project, but we're expecting to hear from the province sometime. We were expecting to hear from the province mid-March. I got notification today that they may not make the federal and the provincial. Province is expected mid-March, but the federal may not make decisions till the end of the summer now, which they said they would probably do it in the spring. So we're looking probably to take from reserves for this project. And so that's, if council wants me to dwell down into the SCADA a little more, I'd be happy to, for sure. But I think in the recommendation, it's important to know that we're also looking at the arsenic removals in Island Lake. That's been discussion with our engineer, and with the ministry. We're okay. We are above half what we're allowed, and we're expecting the ministry to ask us very shortly what's our long-term plans, and that's where Mark and myself and the town engineers are deeply into a removal process, new well, or a mixing solution to try and stabilize and remove the arsenic would be the ultimate goal on that. But all three Island Lake wells do have below the ministry guideline arsenic. However, it is above half the allowable limit. So, and we do have a little bit of work to do on our tower in the coming years, but nothing major right now. So, but this is the arsenic and the SCADA upgrades are the two major projects that this council should see, provided the ministry doesn't change any more of the allowable chemicals in our water. Arsenic and the SCADA are the focus of 2020 for the SCADA, and 2021 to 2025, I would think, for the arsenic removals. With that, I also provided council with the budget. The budget was normally a Schedule A item. Its revenues have generally matched the expenditures in all the years that we've had in the past, and this would be one of the biggest pulls from the reserve contribution that I'm seeking to tell council about.
So there isn't a required motion for any of this? This is just to inform us as to your processes?
Well, we've never really had a approval of the Waterworks budget.
Just asking.
Yeah, if the treasurer is happy, then I'm definitely happy with with you receiving my report and me continuing.
Okay.
The SCADA proposal will be coming through.
It'll be a
to
tender,
you
it's a
for-
tender
for-
that,
for
or,
approval.
yeah, it's a tender that will
Just
come through
making you
council.
aware of where we are with it.
Yeah.
And just one point of clarification, I know John's trying to get in question too. The reserves that Mike talked about are water reserves, they're not general reserves.
The upgrade of the SCADA, from the sounds of it, falls into the category of, quote, modernization as defined by the provincial government. And as we all know, they have lots of money for, quote, modernization projects. To give you an example, the county is using modernization grant money to do a lot of interesting work in terms of its building permit process and computerization and that kind of thing. And it strikes me, and Mark will correct me if I'm wrong here, that those monies, which I think Mono has received some, and certainly the county has received some, those monies would not be improperly spent if they were spent on something that modernized a current data collection, water monitoring system. Just a thought.
I was waiting for Les to jump up and down, but I'll jump in on that. I don't disagree that they couldn't, that they could certainly be used for that purpose. The only concern I'd raise at this time is those funds were provided municipally wide, and you would be basically committing those municipal wide funds to just the users of the water system. And that's the only reason I throw that out. But certainly they could be used if that was a decision council wanted to make, to use those monies just for those users of the water system.
Well, let's put it this way. I could understand somebody like myself who gets water from a spring, maybe not wanting to see resources, spent on a small, not a small, but a significant portion of our population by the same standard to, wherever the money comes from, you could end up with that same conclusion unless the reserves that you're thinking of are built up as a result of the water charges over a period of time.
At this point in time, yes.
Okay.
That's the route we were looking at.
Okay. So if there's no other questions of Mike, then we can tell him to make it so. Yes. Yep.
Mike, this software sounds like it probably needs some individual programming for our particular system. Is that something that you're going to need to get some training on, or somebody have training for that?
So the main part of SCADA is it's not an off-the-shelf product. It is an off-the-shelf product for the bare bones, but telling it what to do is all prepared and done by a system integrator. So they write the code, they write the if then go to alarm processes and so forth. So that's all part of the RFP, and the current operating authority will be aware of the updates and will be trained with myself and Public Works Manager on the processes that are involved with the reporting, the studying, the remote access, the control, the changing, and so forth. And yeah, so that will be that's all part of the RFQ right now, is training.
Okay.
If that means he can get rid of his dipstick now.
You can sign up for the training with us. That's what I'm thinking.
Okay then, so if there's nothing further on that item, we'll move on to item 7, Rural Zone Accessory Structures Report. Trotman, and looking for some direction from council.
So this report is a follow-up from the resolution of council, and it's cited in there on page 1, of course. It's an overview report at this point in time, is to give some background on what a few municipalities with a similar context to Mono have done with respect to accessory structures, their sizes in non-settlement areas, so forth, with respect to setbacks, coverage, height, and so forth. So it's a bit of an exploratory report, and it's on that basis to sort of seek some council input and feedback, further direction.
Thank you for this. I think it really gives us a sense of what's going on in other locations. I personally have a preferred option here, and that is the Town of Caledon zoning bylaw. And the definition, building accessory, means a detached building, the use of which is incidental, subordinate, and exclusively devoted to a main building or main use on the same lot. Use accessory means a use which is clearly incidental, subordinate in size, and exclusively devoted to a main building or main use and located on the same lot therewith. I raise that subordinate in size because then to go to the last page of your report, you indicate that while all bylaws are proportionate to property size, none are proportionate to residence size. There seems to be a contradiction there, at least the way I read it.
Well, so I guess that's a question of how you interpreted the Caledon bylaw, but it's relative to the zone, right? So certainly I think for like agricultural zones or commercial zones, an accessory structure, for example, could be larger than a primary building that's on site for whatever reasons that would be required, certainly in an agricultural zone.
I appreciate that, but the way I'm reading this is that you would need a variance to exceed the size of the residence, for instance. In other words,
Yeah, I mean, based on that general comment on page 4, you would, I guess, for the Caledon situation, based on that definition.
The other aspect of the Caledon regime, which I am frankly attracted to, is the statement here that some municipalities, for example, Caledon, have chosen to control the screening of accessory structures with landscape buffering, lighting, and layout of accessory uses and structures per site plan control legislation in the Planning Act. And I think that's something that we probably wouldn't need for the small accessory structures, but something that we should consider above a certain size.
Yeah, I mean, I believe their site plan department deals with all those matters, and they provide overview under site plan control for that purpose in Caledon. Go ahead.
Sorry, just to go back to the definitions, John, I read it differently, and I'll give you my take on it, just having read a lot of bylaws myself too. They define building accessory, so they define the accessory building, and they don't say that has to be subordinate. And then they say accessory, so they talk about the use, not the accessory building being subordinate to the main use. So I would take that to be that you could have a larger building, for even the residential use. Like if you had a larger building, that's still going to be permitted because that accessory use, being the building, is still subordinate to the residential use. Or if you had even a small hobby shop or a hobby farm, whatever, as long as that use was subordinate to the main residential use. So the residential use is still the primary use on the property. You could still have a larger building. Now that's the way I read that just reading it the first time.
But it seems to say subordinate in size. Maybe that's where I got off track. Subordinate in use, I appreciate.
Right.
Subordinate in size tells me that you can't build something larger than the residence, as an example, without a variance. I could be wrong.
And again, I just read it totally different the first time. We could certainly get interpretation from what Caledon actually interprets that as, but,
So, for instance, the microbrewery, what would be the effect on that situation? Any?
Well, so, yeah, the application.
Can you maybe look at a different one? I mean, that one has not even
We
come
haven't done-
before
okay.
council. I mean, I don't want to get you debating something that hasn't even come before you.
Let me say this much. I mean, they are going through a proposal for a rural special amendment. And it would be they need to meet the test under the provincial policy for on-farm diversified use, which captures microbrewery. I guess what remains, we don't know yet, is the building accessory or not? I think we don't have an answer for that right now. So therefore, would it even apply in that case? We just don't know yet.
Fred?
Yeah, I just had a very simple-minded question, because I get lost when I read definitions that include things like incidental, subordinate, and exclusively devoted to. I don't even know what those words mean. But my simple-minded question is, would any of these other bylaws in other municipalities have prevented what we have seen happen here in Mono with a case that I won't mention by name, but we're getting a very large accessory building? Would any of these other bylaws have
I would
prevented
hazard a
that?
guess, though. I mean, if you look at Aaron, for example, on the first chart, lots less than 2 acres shall have accessory coverage of 1,250 meters, 2 to 5, 2,000 square feet, lots over 5 acres, 5,000 square feet. I haven't gone into all the detail how they've come up to those particular prescriptions, but I'm guessing more than one of those municipalities has met a similar situation, which has created a change in the bylaw to create a more specialized scope and application for accessory structures based on lot size, and I think that's what you're seeing, for example, in Aaron.
And then so if we changed
So-
our definitions to something like that.
It would in the future, right? It's the
in
same
the future,
scenario,
yes,
in other words.
But then we would have legitimate people in rural agricultural areas with horses who wanted an indoor trot, but they could always then apply for a
Yeah,
variance, right?
variance, I mean, so the report talks about that, right? It talks about what happened before the current bylaw prescription. And it talks about 2008-30 amendment and why that happened. I'm looking for my page number here, but it does, I think there was a number of variances that triggered that change to where it is now. I mean, so I suppose the pendulum does swing and can swing. And then as I'm looking at John as I say this, so the question is on how do you refine? No, I mean, clearly the bylaw prescription date didn't envision a certain situation that has arisen. It was meant to provide, I think, an upset limit or flexibility for what should be a primary use in a rural area, which is agriculture, right? And it lends itself to that, agriculture as a primary use. But with the one zone, the rural A zone, it also captures non-agricultural rural residential uses as well. So no, I don't think that could have been foreseen.
So,
I don't have no idea whether we should how we define our bylaw. I just don't know.
Sure.
I think we need a little more time to digest this and maybe get clarity on the issue of subordinate in size. But the direction I would love to see us go is rather than putting the emphasis on proportionate to lot size, I think there has to be some relationship to the residence or the primary structure on the property. There has to be some kind of ratio there, and you know, in the extreme, you say it shouldn't exceed without having to get a variance, and then we start dealing with variances. But I'd rather deal with variances that are appropriate than, as you say, the pendulum has gone the other direction where things are maybe not happy. I do like the notion of building in some mechanism for a site plan approval in terms of lighting and buffering and planting and that kind of thing around buildings of a particular size. I don't think we need to worry about the pool house, but I think we do need to worry about the larger structures. And then I would have a sort of a general forgiveness, or I don't want to say the word exemption, because I still think that there's a role for maybe site plan, but not stringent site plan on things like riding arenas and things like that. Things that are clearly agricultural, okay? I have greater level of acceptance of that as opposed to some of these other things. So I don't know if that's helpful at all.
Were you looking at site plan approval on those agricultural uses as well?
No, I'm just saying that when we do the municipal approval, that we have conditions with regard to lighting and setback from neighboring residences. I mean, there's a number of things that I think we should consider, rather than simply having a relationship to the lot size and then just leaving it at that.
So that would be, well, it's kind of de facto site plan, where if you're giving municipal approval, you say that, and other than zoning compliance means, say, setbacks, height, lot coverage for a structure. I also want to see what the exterior finish of the elevations might be. Where, we need some more trees, Mr. Applicant, and where are you going to put them? And, yeah, so some of the elements that would normally weigh in on a site plan application, and then there'd have to be a way to, 98% of the folks will do that, but we have to be mindful of the 2% that won't, and then how do we capture it legally? Because we come back in here and it still hasn't been done, so there's an agreement that could be related to that, or a deposit to ensure compliance. And then we wouldn't want to be onerous on agricultural use, right? And then where's the trigger there? Because you and I have a sense of exactly what that means. And I think 100 acres, there's farm equipment, there's an obvious production, agricultural operation. But the test under OMAFRA is not always that high. It can be less than that. So I have a rural property. I own 15 acres, and I'm farming. Okay, how there's some nuance there as to where the needle will be then between what is, say, a true separate rural residential use, and then an agricultural use.
I just want us to be mindful of some of these issues, because the irony here is that under our current rules, in terms of maximum square footage allowable on lots of a particular size, we run the risk of seeing an increasing number of accessory buildings that in fact exceed many commercial buildings that are subject to all these rules, and yet something that is larger is simply if it doesn't exceed X number of square feet, if it's on a property of Y size, then a few other conditions are met, municipal approval is granted, and I think we've got to be more careful about that.
Okay, so is there any other direction that council wants to give to staff?
Just one comment I'd make, just on the setbacks. I know that was one issue that was specifically identified. I think, you know, like, we're at 9.8, with the exception of garages, 9.8 meters. Only one municipality has a setback larger than ours, and that is, from what I can tell, where did I just see it? Caledon's, and they're at 10 meters, so what's that, 2 feet more? So, I mean, I think our setbacks are in line and quite a bit larger than other municipalities that we're dealing with. So I'm just throwing that out there. It was one of the things we were to look at. And,
Okay.
I think we can work with some of the comments that you've got and maybe come up with some unique ideas on how to deal with the smaller stuff. We wanted to provide you with what's out there and what's being done
No, we
elsewhere.
appreciate that background work. So.
Thanks,
Okay,
David.
so we're getting on and we're starting to lag. So, with new vim and vigor, we will start into Schedule A. Ralph, did you have anything on Schedule A?
I do.
Put your mic on, please.
Thank you.
You didn't put your mic on.
Oh, it didn't go on, thanks. I want number 5. We did an application. The application was for stream signage. And what? Okay. So I did write a letter to Your Honor and to Mr. Creelman suggesting that we could put a request at the next county meeting when this was brought up for a portion of the fund. And I did suggest in my letter that they would drop everybody's allotment by about 4,000, putting 16,000 into the purse and dividing that up between Mulmer and ourselves. Mulmer didn't get anything either. And in the decision making, they had 4 criteria. The 4th criteria was regional impact. And I don't know, I didn't see the application, David. I don't know whether you alluded to that, but there's a regional impact in that we'd be naming, we haven't agreed to this, but we'd offer to and hope to put stream names on the bridges, which are actually on county roads. And that would be a support of the county. So anyway, I'm hopeful that you can bring this up with a positive outcome.
We are attempting to have it tabled.
All right.
And so that we can get some of these questions answered, because the report definitely doesn't, I mean, unless you're on that committee.
You don't know how they mark it.
I have no idea.
Yeah.
And it does not seem to be equitable. So that's.
And it's not really a county council committee, it's a committee of basically staff.
Yeah.
And we don't know the criteria, how they applied the criteria.
So I don't know quite how the county works, but does it, do you not discuss this motion?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, okay.
So that's why, you know, if it looks like we have to table, and so that we can find out more information. Yeah. Anything else?
I spoke to Mark about this. This is with respect to the cannabis, apparent cannabis operation, which is on here in Ontario. And I understand we haven't heard back yet from the Ministry of Health, and there's an ongoing effort by Mark to get an answer. And Kyle Seeback has thrown in his offer to be helpful. So maybe.
I appreciate the letter from Mr. Seeback, and would be approaching him if I don't hear back from Health Canada. Just so council is aware, I've gone to the various anonymous sites that they keep telling me to. I still have not received a formal response to my letter. I have written to the Director General of Health Canada at this point. I got his contact through Roma, and I've given him the history. And I've asked for a formal response from him with a direct email to a person. So if I don't hear back from him within the next week, Ralph, I'll certainly be forwarding things off to Mr. Seeback to see if he can rattle some chains.
Thanks, Mark. I appreciate you pursuing this.
Anything else? Fred? No? John?
Two quick things. I found the Hydro One forestry letter very interesting because this has been a pet peeve of mine in terms of whether or not the maintenance of our hydro corridors is really up to snuff. Item number 14, MTO Regional Transportation Plan. As you'll see there, it was a meeting held in Orangeville. It was organized by Orangeville. We were invited, and Dave, I believe you were invited, but maybe not able to attend.
I was not well that
You were
week.
not well,
And
yeah.
I had to muster up my energy to get to the planning committee meeting that night. It was
I'm
one of
not-
the two.
From what I'm
So
seeing,
I had all good intentions to go. but I just-
I'm not seeing that you missed that much, but my point, which I've raised with a few people, is that both myself and Steve Anderson, the deputy mayor of Shelburne, have expressed very strong views about GO bus service, and it was troubling to find out that this meeting occurred and we didn't know anything about it. So I've asked to be added to the circulation for any future correspondence, and we'll certainly attend any meetings that are held because we have a long way to go to improve our current system, let alone add service.
Yeah, there was a note on the second last page about next steps, and so Metrolinx with their partners are going to look at, they're going to have a memo for this spring. It mentions future transit planning projects and supporting policy. So I will get the notification from the Dufferin County Contact Coordinator on that.
And the county is part of an oversight committee because they've defined municipalities as quote upper tier and single tier and a local tier or lower tier as they call it, but it has to be a population of 100,000. And the next meeting of that group is tomorrow, and I will be following up with the county to see whether they intend to go to it.
Okay, so if there's nothing further, we accept Schedule 8 of this agenda. Moved by Creelman and seconded by Magdalo. All in favor? Carries. Okay, so due to the lateness of the hour, I just want to make sure that council doesn't feel that staff isn't ignored. But is there anything that you wanted to report, Mr. Luca, because you've been very quiet tonight?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just a couple of things. Mono hosted last Friday the DMOA meeting. Rotates among the municipalities. From a treasury, Mark, Fred, and myself attended. From a treasury point of view, 2020 is a tax year for reassessment. The assessment office, MPAC, they will be sending out tax assessment notices through the whole year. In the past, they would do like a mass mailing, and they got inundated with phone calls. For Dufferin County, so basically Mono, the assessment notices will go out around September 21st, so late summer, early fall. And then just a second item, Fred and I will be doing interviews this Wednesdays, so tomorrow and Thursday for the accounting payroll clerk position.
Thank you. Kim?
A couple of things. Met with the RAC committee last Thursday, and one of the things I think council will be pleased to hear is that Earth Day activities were revamped, and RAC has decided that the best way to handle Earth Day is as we did a couple of years ago, and that's to partner with the county in that we will offer to our residents that we will give them bags and free stickers for the bags to pick up garbage in front of their homes or wherever. And we will do a marketing campaign to make Mono shine, so everyone can get out and work on cleaning up wherever they want to, roads, parks, whatever. But I think that when it was brought to RAC's attention that if they were cleaning up the parks, having a day might be a little more opportune as opposed to cleaning up the roads. So they're quite happy with the outcome of, let's just market the heck out of this and get people to clean things up on their own. So that's where we're going with that. I was also approached last week by a couple of individuals who would like to come to Mono to have a duathlon in May of 2021. And a duathlon is hiking or biking and running. Very preliminary. I spoke to RAC about it that evening, and RAC, a couple of members have agreed to meet with these people and ask them to expand on their business plan, basically wanting to know what running an event like this in Mono will do for Mono residents. What good is it going to do for Mono? So I'll keep you posted on that one. Financials for Winterfest. I'm happy to let you know that Winterfest brought in excess of $2,500 this year between the kitchen, popcorn, and the raffle. So when you couple that with the budget that council gives for the event, when I do up all the financials, I'm pretty sure I can let council know that we've covered our costs, and it was a great event for about 500-600 people. Valentine's Euchre is this Friday night at Mono Center. I'll be there. More than welcome. I would love to have any of the council members join me. I know I've got 2 of you out there, so that's great. Thank you so much for being there. So if you don't know what to do Valentine's night, come on out to Mono. We'll be there from 7 to 10. And Monday I will be joining the ski club at Menorah to assist them with their cross-country ski day, working the kitchen for them. So that's Monday. Great group to partner with. And finally, just letting you know that at long last, the final bits of LED lighting at the halls is being completed. The lower south room in particular at Mono Center and the washrooms at the halls are finally getting their LED lights. So go into the washrooms at Mono Center now. You're really going to be able to, at Menorah, at least they're done there. You'll really be able to see what you're doing. So just let you know.
Okay.
No reason for missing anything now.
Okay, thank you. Mike?
So I heard back from the MTO and Attorney General's that they've received our application. I can't tell you any more yet, so I'm hoping they give us a little more advance notice ahead of our GRA, so we can prepare some paperwork, but, so they are, I did hear from the regional director at MTO, and they asked me some subsequent questions and commented that the Minister of Transportation is trying to meet with everybody, so that one seemed to be positive. Tenders coming next council meeting, so there'll be 10 to 12 tenders on our operational approved budget that the council will see. And just further to Kim's note on Earth Day, 99% of our roads in Mono remain unadopted. So there's adopt a road policy that council has approved. So should you be talking to somebody that would wish to have the road signed in their name upon approval from council, Public Works would be happy to process that application.
And David?
A few things. I'll just focus on the key ones here. So there's the NEDO meeting on February the 18th to deal with collaboration. It's in the evening. I'll be trying to attend that. Just remembering again, there will be March 3rd and 12th meetings for the Dufferin County OP update. And I will be attending that as well. They'll be weighing into some of the nitty-gritty term, including service capacity. So I'll be getting back to them on that. Plan Committee, or PNAC, is on the 25th of February, coming up. And we'll have a full evening, full throttle, which is the 89 third line proposal. It has come back with an addendum to the report and additional information, which they feel will address concerns that have been raised to date. And then, of course, the other key item is going to be the fill bylaw review. So that's going to be a fulsome night. It's going to include the updated bylaw, including reference to the new reg, a rationale, and a handbook. So yes, lots on the go.
I anticipate being able to bring a draft fence bylaw next month, whichever meeting has more room on it. Staff's been working on that for a while now. With respect to the council donation budget, we have an application form that says people have to submit their application for consideration by October of the year prior, but nobody does. And every March, we bring whatever we have to council for donations, and then they trickle in through the course of the rest of the year. So I'm proposing that we advertise through the free channels that we have, social media, Facebook and such. So I've had an online and a fillable PDF application form created, and I'm suggesting that we promote between now and the first week of March that any applications received by that time will be considered by council on March 24th, and see if we can't get it all into one group then. And that's all I have.
Good, thank you. Mark?
Very quickly, Ralph already covered off the cannabis. The OPP letter of agreement, I had emails with Nikki today. She's fine with it. It's been signed off by Riley, so you will get that on your next agenda, just what is in the letter agreement. And that'll probably roll through to Police Services Board after that, John. The county service review is an ongoing, it wasn't supposed to be so time-consuming, and it's very busy. We did have meetings in last February 4th again with John and myself, trying to finalize the final list of uses to be looked at, and we are doing we're bringing Optimus into the office just to meet with any staff related to any service delivery that they've got on February 19th. I met our new Constable Romanek. He's definitely taller than I am. I thought he'd be this big, half a person. But anyways, he's a very approachable gentleman. He's formerly from Orangeville. He's coming back from Wellington into the Orangeville area, and is gung-ho, ready to go. So I told him we'll keep him busy. And I advised him about the agreement that we had going through with OPP. So, and then finally, just last one, a good news story. Jake in the office has been asked to be a speaker at the FME Software Conference, and they're speaking on the development and the use of the FME software, which transfers and extracts sign data from the third-party app on the iPads that the guys in the trucks carry. So if they see a sign, they can put it in their app. And then what they've been able to do is develop an app so it's sitting on Kara's desk in the GIS ArcView system in the morning and can be immediately looked at. So it's a very smooth delivery that Jake's worked through with the two software companies and basically three different communication systems. So so that's in April.
Good. Ralph, do you have anything?
Two items. I attended last Friday a stakeholders meeting for the conservation authorities organized by the ministry. Members of council, board members, staff were there, and it was basically trying to define what are the core programs for the conservation authorities. So we all sat around the tables, about 7 or 8 people on each table, and we answered a number of questions. One person kept notes, and they're collating them, I guess. We'll probably hear something, I don't know. This is an ongoing concern, of course, as Fred brought this up about 6 months ago. So more to follow. The other item is probably the largest globally significant event that's happened for many years, and it's about the coronavirus. So I'd like to say a few more words about it. Last time when I spoke about it was 2 weeks ago, and the statistics are really soft, given where they're coming from and the political interference, etc. But this is what we have. There were about 5,000 cases 2 weeks ago, and now as of today, there's 43,000 cases. The majority of them are in China, and about 75% of them are in Hubei province, where Wuhan is. They're really learning a lot of interesting stuff about these. You have to understand a disease to understand how you can control it. There's no treatment, as you know. There's no antibiotics. There are antivirals, and there's some evidence that they may have some place here. This has now surpassed SARS in terms of mortality. SARS was interesting because the virus was capable of mutating, and that's a very significant thing. It means that if it can mutate, it can change its properties, such as its infectivity and its how serious it is in the health effects. This virus so far has not mutated, and the feeling is that it's been around for quite a long time. It just sort of surfaced and has become a big thing. There's a lot of information coming out on transmissibility. That means, how do you get it? And it can be passed on through water droplets, through coughing or breathing, and that's why wearing a mask is of some value. People have been infected even through water droplets in the air that have landed on their eyes. The eye gets red, and a little bit later they get an infection and they start to cough. And it's also in the stool, so it can be transmitted through fecal contamination. The coronaviruses in general survive on surfaces such as the table here, or the doorknob of the front entrance to the town, for something around 9 days as being viable. It's pretty frightening. About 70% of the people who were infected in the first wave, the second wave, I guess, in Hubei, stated that they had had no contact at all with anybody that they knew had been infected. That's a little bit frightening. About 40% of people who have the disease as evidenced by respiratory symptoms and a positive test also don't have fever. So, that's the way they're trying to catch you at the airport. Put this, shoot on your forehead and see if you got a temperature or not. So it's really not very good. What's starting to happen is that there are getting to be clusters outside of China, and the transmissibility is probably fairly easy. In other words, casual contact can produce it. There were some Chinese that walked into a store in Singapore to buy a few things and left, and a number of the staff came down with the infection. The time to get infected is a mean of 5 days. At 14 days, about 99.5% of people will have clinical symptoms from the time that they were infected. That's why they've taken 14 days as the quarantine period. But in fact, there have been a number of people who've gotten sick that were longer than 14 days since their contact. So it's a big thing, and it's become a big economic thing, as you've probably noticed. China's slowed right down. Tourism has slowed down. There's not as much travel, and the oil prices have dropped. I think there's a lot more to come. Nobody knows when the peak is going to occur in terms of maximum numbers. It partly depends on the transmission outside of China, and it's now, I believe, in something like 32 different countries. So time will tell. Bit frightening.
Got anything?
In terms of mortality, about 80% of people who die have two things. They're either over 60, I'm in trouble, or they have a comorbidity, meaning they have diabetes or heart disease or something like that. And I've only seen this one item about children, but in the first group of people that were infected in Hubei, in Wuhan, nobody under age 15 was infected. One other thing about infectivity, which is really upsetting, is that the time when you shed the virus can occur before you have any symptoms. You may not even have a runny nose, so it makes it very difficult.
Okay, John, do you have anything?
No, I'm fine.
Sure.
I just wanted to mention about Marble Productions, they came to Menora Park, and the production is sort of a reality show. Children 12 to 15 who are potential Olympic champions in different sports. There are 10 of them. And of course, when they came there, it was for cross-country skiing. And it was fabulous to watch. We had Perdita Felician, she's the host of the program, and Becky Scott, who has won an Olympic gold medal, a different way, but she still got it. And it was fascinating to watch these kids, and one of the things is going to be ski jumping, and I'm not sure if my athlete was a figure skater, how I'd feel about them going down a jump. But that's what they're doing, and on Thursday, there's a meeting to see if they may come back to do their final thing at Menora. So that could be interesting, too. There also was a race, 250, is that right? Yep, 250 racers on last Saturday. And a lot of people, they absolutely love the building. They go on and on about it, everybody who goes in. And the new kitchen was a big hit, I have to say, for the caterers, particularly the ones that were working for Marble Productions. And we also had a moonlight ski that ends up at our place. Why are you doing this?
A little disorganized.
Yeah, it was, but then I didn't organize it, so it's okay. And it was absolutely gorgeous. I don't know if you looked outside on Friday night, but it was terrific. And to see all the old people who started the club in the first place with their $50, it was really, really quite good. And I think that's it.
Thank you. Okay, so any notices of motion? And there's no in-camera, so we have a confirming bylaw if there's no other business. That we introduce and give the necessary readings to a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of Council of the Town of Mono in Session 3-2020 held on 11th of February 2020, that be signed by the Mayor and the Clerk, sealed and engrossed in bylaw book. Moved by Creelman, seconded by Martin. All in favor? Carried. And just to make sure everybody remembers that the next meeting is March 10th in the morning, correct? Because there was a lot of time changes. Okay, so that we adjourn this meeting at 10:20 p.m. and moved by Nix and seconded by Magdalo. All in favor? Carries. Thank you, everybody.